Hey guys, tonight we're unravelling a story that glitters with gold but reeks of old blood and bad decisions. Welcome to the life of ancient Egyptian royalty, where everyone bows to you by day and someone might be slipping poison into your wine by night. Sounds glamorous, right? But no, you probably won't survive this, and even if you do, you'll wish you hadn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and drop your city and time in the comments. I want to know where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born under the sharp eyes of Ra, cloaked in linen before you can even speak. Your cradle's carved from cedar and inlaid with lapis lazuli. Nurses coo in your ear, calling you divine, as if the gods themselves sighed your soul into being. But you're not just any royal child. You're the firstborn of Pharaoh, an automatic contender for the throne, which means congratulations. You've been cursed since your very first breath. Your name is recorded on papyrus scrolls with golden ink. Your wet nurse is higher ranked than most generals. You wear a cobra-headed pendant before your first tooth comes in. From outside, the palace gleams like a pearl on the desert's edge, columns rising like date palms, walls painted with scenes of lotus flowers and triumphant chariot rides. But inside, it's quieter. Not peaceful quiet. Hushed, wary, calculating quiet. Footsteps echo too carefully. Laughter always carries a strain. Even your toys are watched, your food tasted, your linen robes scrutinized for trace amounts of snake venom. Because here's the deal, you're valuable. But not in the heartwarming bedtime story kind of way. More like a pawn on a board where the stakes are eternity. You're a threat to your uncles, a stepping stone for your aunt, a prize for your mother's ambitious cousin. Everyone wants something from you, including the gods. And the gods? They're demanding. Every twitch of your existence is bound up in ritual. You're expected to wake with the sun god and sleep with the moon goddess, speak with reverence, walk in measured paces and never ever cry in public. That's not divine. That's exhausting. Your teachers are scribes, priests, warriors, men and women who shape you like wet clay. They tell you stories of Osiris, the great king who was betrayed, dismembered, and stuffed into a coffin by his jealous brother. You listen carefully, because everyone in your lineage claims descent from Osiris, and the moral of the story isn't lost on you. Kings die, often by someone close. By the time you're 10, you've mastered the art of hiding behind your own eyes. You learn to nod at the right moments, to stay perfectly still when your half-brother is praised for something you did. You memorize the layout of the palace, not just the open courtyards and prayer halls, but the hidden tunnels and servant paths. You know where someone could disappear, and where someone might be pushed. Here's a fun little twist from history. Ancient Egyptian royals weren't just kings and queens, they were living gods, or at least that's what the propaganda insisted. Pharaohs weren't merely rulers, they were incarnations of Horus, keepers of Mayat, divine order. So when you're born into this role, you're not just a child, you're a symbol, you're property of the state, a walking talisman, and a future deity whose every move will be carved in stone. But let's peel back the gold veneer. Because while the outside world sees a child of light, inside the palace it's all about manoeuvring. A court of sycophants flutters around your mother, praising your divine nose or your blessed curls. The moment she leaves the room, they're whispering about how fragile you look, how accidents happen. One fringe tale passed down involves a young prince's toy being replaced with a miniature cobra, an accidental playtime encounter that ended with swollen limbs and a funeral at dawn. Was it true? Scholars debate it. The lines between myth, warning, and reality tend to blur when everyone's wearing eyeliner and plotting your downfall. And sure, not every royal child died young. Some made it through the gauntlet and ruled well into their 60s, but those were the exceptions. Childhood was already a gamble in ancient Egypt, what with crocodiles, dysentery and sunstroke. Add a constant risk of palace accidents, and you're basically living in an ancient version of Survivor, but the prize is a golden throne, and the punishment is ritual death. Speaking of rituals, the rituals. You're dragged out of bed before dawn to observe purification ceremonies. Your head is shaved every 10 days in a solemn rite to keep your divine skull clean. You wear a ceremonial loincloth so stiff it leaves welts. Your meals are dictated by astrology, and you're forbidden from eating garlic, fish, or anything that might cloud the purity of your essence. So no falafel for you, just honey-soaked bread, date wine, and constant surveillance. Here's one of the more unsettling facts. In some periods, royal children weren't just monitored, they were literally sequestered. Hidden away in sacred chambers, isolated except for their nurses and tutors, raised like veal calves for the day they'd be sacrificed, metaphorically or otherwise, on the altar of dynasty. There are inscriptions detailing how some were kept in silence for days as a test of divine endurance. Scholars argue about the accuracy of these accounts, but it's plausible. After all, Egypt was obsessed with dualities, life and death, silence and speech, power and vulnerability. And as a royal child, you embodied them all. One day, a temple priest leans down to you during an incense ceremony and whispers, "You must always be still when others are loud." It sticks with you, because it's not just spiritual advice, it's survival code. You start watching your cousins more closely, noting who smiles too quickly, who lingers at the edge of balconies. You notice the servant who always arrives after everyone else is asleep, and you wonder, was that a flicker of steel in their sleeve? And still, the sun rises each morning, the lotus blooms, the harp music floats through the corridors. Your portrait is painted in profile, forever youthful, forever divine. But behind the coal-lined eyes, you know the truth. Being royal in ancient Egypt isn't a gift, it's a gilded trap. The palace isn't your home, it's a stage set for betrayal. And as the days pass, you begin to understand. You're not here to rule, you're here to survive. You're 13 now, which in ancient Egyptian years means you're basically overdue for betrayal. Your voice has changed. You wear the first ceremonial wig woven from a blend of your own hair and that of a sacred ibex. Don't ask why, it's a status thing. And most importantly, you're now a viable threat to anyone in the palace with ambition, and even a dash of cruelty. Welcome to the big leagues of divine dysfunction. Sibling rivalries with the bite of a cobra and the body count of a small war. Your older half-brother Ramy once shared papyrus scrolls with you and helped you sneak pomegranate tarts from the kitchens. Now he avoids eye contact and keeps a dagger tucked beneath his sash. Not for dramatic flair, because this is the age where princes mysteriously fall off balconies or go missing on Nile hunting trips. You watch him during feasts, smiling too much at generals, trading long glances with the high priest, and always sitting just far enough from the pharaoh to seem loyal, yet close enough to be noticed. You've read this dance in the scrolls. It's the slow choreography of a coup. Here's something you don't see in the hieroglyphs. Siblings like Ramy aren't just family. They're competitors in a gladiator pit made of incense, flattery, and subtle threats. You don't fight them with swords, you use gifts, rumours, strategic silences. One week, you accidentally praise your cousin's military training within earshot of your father. The next, that cousin mysteriously finds himself reassigned to a fort deep in Nubia, far from any line of succession. You didn't technically do anything, but the ripples say otherwise, and it's not just brothers. Your sister Neferura is 16 and smarter than all of you. She speaks 4 dialects, has memorized 20 generations of royal lineage, and can recite the laws of Mayat with a steady gaze that makes grown men feel like nervous children. She's also recently been married to another one of your half-brothers, under the time-honoured royal logic that family trees should look like lotus flowers, not tangled vines. The marriage is political, ceremonial, and yes, gross. But more importantly, it makes her husband a direct heir. And her? She's no passive queen-in-waiting. She's got allies among the priesthood and the kind of grace that makes people whisper, maybe she should rule. And in Egypt, sometimes people who whisper that kind of thing vanish, not always. But often enough to make the walls lean in when the gossip starts. Quirkier still, there are rumours of tests the siblings endure in secret. Not public rites, but private informal challenges designed to prove worthiness. Trials like fasting for 7 days in the desert, sleeping in the tomb of an unfinished pyramid, or retrieving a sacred artifact from a crocodile-infested bend of the Nile. Maybe it's just palace law to scare you into caution. Maybe it's real. Hard to say, since those who fail don't often return to explain what went wrong. You've survived so far by cultivating an image. Harmless, devout, slightly forgettable. You compliment others before yourself, pretend to fumble in your prayers, and drop just enough questions during study to seem unthreatening. But you're watching, you're learning, and sometimes when you're alone in the moonlit courtyard, you practice drawing your ceremonial dagger in silence. Because history shows no mercy. Consider Amenemhat-III, a pharaoh who was murdered in his sleep by his own bodyguards, reportedly on the order of his own son. Was it true? Hard to say. Ancient scribes weren't exactly neutral journalists, but even the suspicion was enough to birth a legacy of paranoia. Since then, every ruler kept a rotation of guards and taste testers, and even secret chambers within their sleeping quarters. And if kings feared their own children, what hope do children have? There's a story that keeps surfacing in the palace whispers. A former prince years ago was caught tampering with the sacred Nile calendar, an act punishable by death, since it could throw off planting seasons and offend Hapi, the river god. When questioned, he blamed his younger sister, saying she dared him as a joke. Both were exiled, accidentally, put on a boat that never reached its destination. Their names were struck from temple records. You ask a servant about it once, offhandedly, and her eyes go wide before she begs you not to repeat it. You don't. Because by now you understand the real currency here isn't gold or grain. It's information. Rumours are weapons, secrets are shields, and your siblings? They're both. You start noticing things that younger you would have missed. A charm bracelet on Neferura's wrist that wasn't there yesterday. The way Ramy avoids the garden near the reflecting pool, ever since the head gardener was replaced. A scribe who accidentally writes your brother's name in the pharaoh's titulary, then laughs nervously as he scratches it out. Everyone's playing a game they pretend doesn't exist, and the only rule? Don't get caught moving pieces. There's an awkward birthday feast where you're all forced to perform together, each royal child offering a verse or song to honour the pharaoh. Ramy sings a military hymn in flawless diction, while Neferura recites a poem invoking Hathor's blessings. You deliberately mess up a line in your script, letting the audience chuckle at your humility. Your father smiles, amused. You know he's watching you all like a crocodile beneath murky water, quiet, but ready to strike the moment someone reveals weakness or ambition. And just like that, the feast ends. Back to your rooms, back to silent servants and locked doors. Neferura brushes your arm lightly as she passes. Barely a touch, but enough for you to find a folded piece of papyrus in your palm. Later, in the solitude of your chamber, you unfold it. Just one word in her hand. Careful. You lie awake after that, staring at the painted ceiling, where stars glow gold above Nut, the sky goddess. You're meant to feel safe beneath this divine canopy. Instead, your skin prickles. Your family worships the gods, but you've started to wonder if it's all a lie. Maybe the gods aren't up there at all. Maybe they live right here in the palace, with names like Ramy and Neferura, and they're just as hungry as you are. There's a sound in the palace that you come to dread. It's not shouting or clashing bronze, but the soft whisper of sandals on polished limestone when they shouldn't be there. The quiet hush of midnight movement when most of the court is asleep, and only the truly bold or foolish are walking the halls. That's the kind of sound that usually means someone won't be waking up. You hear it tonight. At first, you think it's part of a dream. You've been dreaming about boats again, drifting down the Nile, alone, the river black as ink, crocodiles slipping beneath the surface like shadows. But when you sit up in bed, the sound is still there. A soft scuff, then another. You hold your breath and press your ear to the thin curtain that separates your chamber from the hallway. Nothing. And then, just faintly, the echo of movement retreating fast. Gone. In the morning no one mentions anything, but the youngest of your half-brothers, Seti, is absent from breakfast. His name isn't spoken, his plate isn't laid, not even a whisper among the servants. You ask a question, just a simple, innocent, "Where's Seti this morning?" and the entire room pauses like a string snapped mid-melody. One of the older guards clears his throat and mumbles something about illness. But the eyes of the others tell the truth. Seti is gone. No ceremony, no mourning rites, no funeral procession, just absence. You're not shocked. Honestly, you're more annoyed. Seti was annoying but harmless. He couldn't even ride a chariot without getting tangled in the reins. He wasn't a threat to anyone, unless, of course, he heard something he shouldn't have, or saw something he couldn't unsee. And that's the thing. In the palace, innocence doesn't keep you safe. Sometimes it makes you even more disposable. Your mother doesn't look at you during the midday offering to Isis. She kneels gracefully, murmurs her prayers, but her eyes stay locked on the painted wall in front of her. When she finally speaks to you again hours later, it's to ask about your progress with the priestly texts. Not a word about your brother, not even a sigh. It's as if Seti never existed. That evening, the atmosphere in the palace feels more humid than usual, thick with unspoken tension. Your sister Neferura walks beside you in the garden. The scent of blue lotus and myrrh drifts through the air. She doesn't speak right away, just gazes toward the papyrus trees, eyes narrowed like she's trying to solve a puzzle only she can see. Seti was stupid, she finally says, her voice low. He repeated something he heard in the scriptorium. Something about Ramy. You swallow, and suddenly your throat is dry. What was it? She gives you a look. Do you think I'm stupid too? You get the message. No one repeats rumours, not even to each other, especially not to each other. Here's a strange little twist of history you learned during your lessons. The word for royal palace in ancient Egyptian Peraar is where the term pharaoh comes from. It doesn't just mean the king, it means the house of the king, the living structure, the beating heart of the institution. But after a few years inside it, you realise the palace is less of a house and more of a trap. It breathes, it listens, and it consumes. Everything inside it is part of a performance. What you say, what you wear, who you nod to in the corridor. That's why every corner has a watcher. Every meal is tested. You stop walking anywhere alone. Even your loyal tutor Senbi suddenly begins excusing himself from evening lessons early, muttering about stomach ailments and not meeting your eyes. One night, Neferura pulls you aside again. You think she's going to scold you for asking too many questions or looking too thoughtful at dinner, but instead she presses a small ivory amulet into your hand, a symbol of Anubis, the god of the dead. It's protection, she says softly, in case you get any more curious. You ask her what happened to Seti. Really ask this time. She looks away. They say he found one of the old scrolls from the tomb archives. Something about lineages. I don't know the details. Only that Ramy had it burned, and Seti disappeared the next night. It's possible, likely even. The Egyptian royal line was messy, full of adoptions, half-siblings, uncle fathers and sister wives. Anyone uncovering too much might challenge someone's claim. It wouldn't be the first time a bloodline was altered posthumously, or a rival erased before they could be inscribed at all. One debate among modern scholars, whether certain pharaohs even existed at all. Some names only appear once, on a broken tablet or a single faded wall. Were they real, or convenient inventions used to mask power transfers and assassinations? We'll never know. But in your time, it's clear. Names are fragile things, easy to write, easier to erase. That night, you sleep with the amulet under your pillow. You start to keep a sharp rock hidden inside your sandal just in case. You practice breathing without making sound. And when Ramy visits your chambers unexpectedly, smiling like a crocodile in the reeds, you make sure to greet him with a bow just a second longer than necessary. "Ah, little brother," he says, brushing a speck of dust from your shoulder. "You're growing taller, almost dangerous." You smile back. "I'm nothing compared to you." "True," he replies, still smiling, "but even the Nile begins as a trickle." It's a compliment technically, but in this palace, everything is a double-edged blade, especially compliments. He leaves, and you sit frozen for a moment. Then, slowly, you unroll a scroll of prayers and begin to read. Not for devotion, but as a distraction. Words are safer than silence. Silence is when memories echo too loud. Later you think about Seti again. What scroll did he find? Was it hidden, forgotten, or left out deliberately? And just before sleep claims you, a thought crawls in like a spider behind your ear. Maybe the palace doesn't consume people. Maybe it just changes them, makes them quieter, smarter, more cautious. Until one day, they become the very thing they once feared. You wake up sweating, not from heat, though the air is thick with the cloying scent of incense and the buzz of early morning flies, but from the dream. It was the one where you're standing before the court, wearing the double crown, and everyone bows, but no one has a face, just blank, smooth ovals where mouths and eyes should be. They chant your name without sound. Then the dream shifts, and suddenly you're sinking into the Nile, your royal robes dragging you down like chains, gold glinting as you sink beneath the reeds. You shake it off. There's no time for symbolism, not today. Because today the Pharaoh, your father, is announcing something. No one says what, but servants are scrubbing the walls with extra vigour, and even the cats seem tense. You notice that Neferura has her hair wrapped in a ceremonial linen scarf, the kind usually reserved for holy processions or diplomatic showings. And Ramy. He's been up since before dawn, sparring in the courtyard with the kind of enthusiasm that only comes when someone's expecting good news, or planning a dramatic public display. The palace is abuzz, but you stay still. That's your tactic now. Stillness. Still water looks harmless right until it swallows something whole. At midday, everyone gathers in the Hall of Offerings. Columns as wide as oxen rise overhead, their painted capitals blooming like blue and red lotus. Your father enters, lifted on a gilded litter flanked by guards with obsidian-tipped spears. His eyes are cloudy now, touched by age and illness, though he hides it well behind gold-lined coal and layers of sheer linen. He speaks with the voice of Ra, strong and clear despite the tremble you notice in his fingers. I name my heir. Every spine in the room tightens. He pauses, whether for drama or because he needs a breath, you're not sure. You glance at Neferura, who looks serene, too serene. Ramy's eyes glint with anticipation. Yours? Dry. Neutral, like a tomb wall waiting for its inscription. I name Prince Ramy as Crown Prince of Upper Egypt. Ah. And Prince Neferura, High Consort of the House of Horus. Double R. The hall erupts in ritual clapping. Scribes take furious notes. Priests nod approvingly. And you bow like everyone else. But inside something shifts, something hardens. You've been passed over, not exiled, not erased, but positioned just low enough to be considered non-threatening, which, as you've learned, might be the safest place of all. Later, Ramy finds you in the library wing. He grins and throws an arm over your shoulder like nothing's changed. Like he didn't just leapfrog over every threat in his path. Don't look so grim, he says. It's all ceremonial anyway. Father's still Pharaoh. We're all just shadows until he joins the gods, you smile thinly. I'm honoured to serve in your shadow. He laughs, but you don't miss the flash in his eyes. Shadows don't speak like that, not unless they've been practicing their lines. Ramy is dangerous now, not just because of ambition, but because he's confident. Untouchable, he thinks. And that kind of arrogance, it breeds mistakes. That night, while others feast, you slip away to the northern archives, where the old records are stored in dust-choked cubbies and stone niches. You light a small oil lamp, breathing through your sleeve to keep from sneezing, and start reading. Not because you're trying to start anything. Not yet. You're just preparing. Because the history of Egyptian royalty is less a straight line and more a zigzag of half-buried chaos. Consider the tale of Prince Pentawer, son of Pharaoh Ramses III. The boy had royal blood but not the right mother. So what did he do? Conspire to kill his father, along with a group of court insiders. The plan failed. Ramses was assassinated, yes, but Pentawer was caught, put on trial, and forced to take his own life, likely with poison. Historians still debate whether it was justice or political theatre. Either way, the message was clear. Even blood can't save you when the tide turns. You don't fancy yourself another Pentawer. You're not planning rebellion. You're just trying to understand the rules of the board you've been dropped onto. And there are some curious patterns, like how certain heirs disappear from records the moment they fall out of favour, or how one pharaoh, Tutankhamun, was likely the product of sibling parents, born with a clubfoot and possibly scoliosis, ruling only 10 years before dying mysteriously at 19. Some say he was frail, others say he was silenced. There's even a fringe theory that he was murdered with blunt force trauma to the back of the head and hastily buried in a tomb not meant for him. You close the scroll, too grim, even for bedtime. Back in your chamber, Neferura is waiting, perched on a low stool beside the window. She's plucking dates from a silver bowl, eating slowly. I expected you to sulk more, she says without looking up. You sit opposite her. Disappointment is a luxury for people with fewer siblings, she chuckles. Smart. Then she lowers her voice. You know he won't stop. Ramy. He's been granted a title. Now he'll want the throne, and he'll remove any barriers between him and it. I'm not a barrier. She finally meets your eyes. You're a backup plan. That's worse. You chew on that. It's true. If Ramy falters, if the gods send a bad omen, if the priests change their tune, you're next in line, and that means you're a threat whether you want to be or not. So, you ask, what should I do? Neferura leans back. Stay close, but not too close. Be helpful, but never eager. And above all, never forget what happened to Seti. Her voice drops lower. He was looking for allies. And that's when you understand. You're not the only one watching from the wings. The royal court isn't just siblings circling each other. It's factions, webs of loyalty and ambition, all weaving in secret. And your role now? Pretend you're just another thread. So you keep your head down, you attend Ramy's ceremonies, smile at his victories, cheer when he displays his new golden mace. You even clap as the court watches him perform mock battles in the training yard. He's the golden boy now, but gold, you've noticed, is soft, beautiful, easy to shape. At night, when the palace is quiet, you trace patterns in the dust with your fingertip, maps of relationships, guesses at allegiances, questions with no answers. You draw Ramy's name at the centre of a circle, then yours, then Neferura's, then a fourth name, someone older, unexpected, the vizier. You stare at it, then blow the dust away. You're 15 now, old enough to be taken seriously but not old enough to be feared, which as it turns out is a pretty good place to be. You move through the palace like a shadow wrapped in linen, noticed but only faintly. You speak with measured humility. You let your sandals scuff a little when you walk so no one thinks you're sneaking. You've cultivated this image deliberately. The quiet royal, the devout son, loyal to Ramy, adoring of your sister, not even remotely interested in anything as exhausting as ambition. It's a mask, of course, and like every Egyptian, mask, it's painted to hide decay. The palace is different now. Since the naming of Ramy as crown prince and Neferura as high consort, everything has shifted. Ramy walks with the confidence of a god already carved into stone. Neferura is dressed in brighter silks, always surrounded by a small entourage of handmaidens who double as spies. And you? You sit in the corner of the garden library, reading scrolls about agricultural quotas and crocodile migration patterns, subjects that scream not a threat. You're putting on the performance of a lifetime, but behind the scenes, your real education begins. Because being royal in Egypt isn't just about temples and ceremonies and golden thrones, it's about blood, and not just the kind inside your veins. The blood that connects families, yes, but also the blood spilled to protect or claim or erase dynasties. This is the era of the divine bloodline, a twisted, tangled lineage that worships itself as much as it worships the gods. It begins with incest, not as a scandal, but as policy. Pharaohs were supposed to be gods on earth, and gods, according to myth, married within their own divine family. So pharaohs did too. Brothers married sisters, daughters married fathers. It wasn't taboo, it was tradition. You were told this early on, of course, but now it starts to settle in with a different weight. Because when everyone shares the same blood, the line between family and threat disappears completely, and you begin to see it everywhere. In the way Ramy and Neferura exchange glances, not just as political allies, but as husband and wife, royal and royal, a concentrated lineage of divine power wrapped in linen and protocol. They may play their parts well, but there's tension there, not hatred, something trickier, competition. You also notice your mother's silence. She smiles during ceremonies, wears her broad collar of turquoise and gold, pours libations with grace. But when it's just the two of you, she says very little. You suspect she knows what you're becoming. You're quiet, she says one evening, watching you eat from a bowl of honey-soaked lotus seeds. I'm learning, you reply. She studies you for a long time, then leans in slightly. Don't make the mistake of thinking your blood protects you. It only makes you valuable, and valuable things are stolen, or broken. It's the closest thing to a warning she's ever given you. You take it to heart. Because behind the high walls and painted columns of the palace, something darker is stirring. Whispers of drought upriver, a merchant caravan that went missing, grain shortages in the lower provinces. Nothing alarming yet, but together they form a pattern. And patterns are what the gods use to speak. You bring your observations to Senbi, your former tutor, who now manages much of the royal correspondence. You frame your curiosity as a concern for your brother's upcoming ceremonial tour. Will the priests in Lower, Egypt be ready to receive him? Will the grain supply for offerings meet expectations? Harmless questions, academic. Senbi narrows his eyes. You think like a vizier? It's not quite a compliment, but he answers you anyway. There are signs, he admits. The Nile flooded late this year. That always brings unrest, and when people are hungry, they begin to question their gods. You nod solemnly, even as a part of you buzzes with electricity, because unrest means distraction, and distraction means opportunity. Your curiosity about the royal bloodline grows, not just out of morbid interest, but out of necessity. You begin combing the archives for anything on disputed heirs, mysterious deaths, or cases of sudden disappearances, and oh, there are many, most cleaned up with poetic language or conveniently lost scrolls. But some are too obvious to hide, like the case of Akhenaten. You find a fragment of a tablet buried in the least used chamber of the library, an old hymn to Aten, the sun disk. You already know the basic story. Akhenaten abandoned the old gods and tried to replace them with a single deity, a radical move that broke the spine of Egypt's priesthood. What the scrolls don't say plainly, but what's written between the lines, is how isolated he became, how his family splintered, how statues of him were smashed, his name was chiselled out of walls, his tomb design abandoned mid-construction, an attempted erasure. But why? Some say he was mad, others think he was murdered, by priests, by generals, even by his own son, and that son? Possibly Tutankhamun, possibly not. The records are that vague. It's a historical ink blot, and you can't tell where the truth ends and the fear begins. You sit there for hours, rereading the same lines, your lamp burning low. Because now you see the danger of divine blood. Not just that it's shared, but that it's sacred, which means when it threatens the system, it must be destroyed like a false idol. Your blood, too, is sacred. You share it with Ramy, with Neferura, with Pharaoh himself. But in the wrong hands, or the right scandal, it becomes a weapon. And you're not the only one who knows it. The vizier calls for you 3 days later. A private audience. No reason given. Which, of course, is a reason in itself. His chamber is cool and dim, lit by a single brazier and smelling faintly of crushed date leaves. He's old, wears no wig, his skin is cracked from decades in the sun, and his eyes, well, his eyes haven't missed much in this world. You read more than your brother, he says without greeting. You nod. You speak less than your sister. Another nod. He folds his hands. That's either wisdom or fear. You hold his gaze. What if it's both? For the first time he smiles, thinly. Then maybe there's hope for you. You don't ask what he means. You know better than to chase clarity in a conversation like this. But as you leave, he adds something. You're not the only one wondering how bloodlines survive, and how they end. It's not a threat, it's an invitation. You begin to understand that in this palace, silence isn't absence, it's architecture. It fills the gaps between columns, nestles behind every painted eye on the murals, and settles into the stone beneath your feet. And the vizier's silence is the most carefully constructed of all. His words that day weren't just observations, they were blueprints. The next morning, he sends a small gift to your chamber, a folded scrap of papyrus tied with twine containing a list of names. No explanation, just a short column of scribes, priests and 2 merchants, figures you barely recognize from feasts or fleeting glances in the palace halls. Some names are crossed out, others circled in red ink. You sit with the list for an hour, heart racing, reading it over and over as if the ink might change. You burn the paper, of course. You've learned that anything worth reading is never worth keeping. That evening, Ramy stages a public ritual in the Temple of Horus. He's in full ceremonial armour, polished until it blinds. The crowd adores him. How could they not? He recites hymns like a priest, lifts offerings with graceful hands, bows with just the right degree of reverence. To the untrained eye, he's a perfect heir. To you, he looks rehearsed, tight, almost desperate, like someone auditioning for a role he already thinks he's losing. You glance at Neferura across the temple court. She's dressed in white linen edged with lapis, her eyes sharp behind a veil of honeyed kohl. She sees it too, you can tell. After the ritual, you're summoned to his side, as you often are now, He likes to be seen speaking with you. A brotherly gesture, a political one. His hand rests lightly on your shoulder as he speaks to nobles, foreign guests, even a delegation from Nubia. You play the quiet sibling again, nodding, smiling, listening. But this time you notice something different. His hand trembles slightly, not from age or fear, from tension. Ramy is under pressure, and pressure, as you've read in those brittle old scrolls, either hardens or fractures. The vizier visits you again 2 days later, unannounced. He enters your chamber with the ease of someone who has never needed permission. There are patterns emerging, he says without preamble, minor uprisings in the outer gnomes. The priests of Sobek are whispering about omens, and Ramy's donations to the temples are thinning. You raise an eyebrow. He just received a new shipment of tribute from the Delta provinces. Yes, the vizier replies, but it seems he's begun building a private palace complex on the West Bank. You blink. West Bank? That's graveyard land, he finishes. Yes. No one builds there unless they plan for death, or unless they want something buried. The vizier pours himself a cup of wine from your jug without asking. He sips it slowly. Your brother has vision, he says, but no patience. He surrounds himself with flatterers, men who know how to bow but not how to warn. You're silent, listening. He will not last, the vizier continues. The people don't love him. The priests resent him. Even the soldiers joke behind his back. They see the golden boy, not the shadow he casts. And then he leans forward. But you are still undefined. That word rings in your ears. Undefined. Like wet clay. Like a throne without a name carved into it. You don't reply. You've learned the power of saying nothing. He leaves with a soft pat on your shoulder. Something fatherly, but too light to be comforting. Later, you find yourself walking the edge of the Nile, where the papyrus reeds sway like anxious whispers. You remember your lessons. The Nile isn't just a river. It's the divine bloodline of Egypt itself. It gives life, but it also drowns. It nourishes, but it can swallow whole villages without a ripple of guilt. And just like the river, the royal line doesn't care about individual survival. It only cares about continuity. You think of your great-grandfather, whom no one speaks of. You once asked Senbi about him. He said only, he ruled briefly, that's all. A life reduced to a footnote. Another king scrubbed from the scrolls like a blemish on a statue, and now you realise that's the real curse of being royal in Egypt. Not death, not betrayal, but erasure. Because death is certain. But memory is chosen. You return to the archives, this time looking for names that don't exist. And you find them. Dozens of partially erased inscriptions. Fragments of a king's cartouche where the name has been chiselled away and replaced. Temples where statues were deliberately decapitated. Tombs with the occupant's face scratched out as if denying them their afterlife. These weren't foreign invaders or rebels. These were pharaohs. Royal blood. Unwelcome history. You trace your fingers over a name nearly lost to sand. An early king mentioned once in a side scroll as the bearer of shame. No reason given. No records of his reign. Just the remnants of red pigment where his name used to be. That's what happens when you fail in Egypt. Not infamy. Oblivion. And Ramy, your brother who trembles, who spends tribute on luxury, who thinks charm is the same as loyalty. He's walking that path. You begin your slow, careful work. First, conversations. Quiet ones. In passing. A word to the captain of the Royal Guard about missed payments. A shared observation with a priest about Ramy's West Bank compound. You plant seeds, not lies, just questions, doubts, concerns. Next, you write. Letters to a provincial governor thanking him for his loyalty to your father, for keeping the peace in difficult times. Not signed as a prince, just as a student of statecraft. It's subtle, but the message is there. You're watching. You care. You know what's happening. You speak with Neferura less. She's too closely tied to Ramy now. If she suspects anything, she says nothing. But her eyes hold a guarded distance. You think she knows you're playing a game. Maybe she's playing one too. One night, the vizier sends a final message. 3 words. Are you ready? You don't answer immediately. You sit by your window looking out at the Nile glowing silver in the moonlight, and you ask yourself the question in silence. Are you ready? To stand against your brother? To become the threat? To walk the line between survival and power? Then you write back one word. Yes, you burn it the moment it's dry, because this isn't just a Game of Thrones, it's a test of memory, and you have no intention of being forgotten. It begins with a beard. Not a real one. Yours is still the soft shadow of something that might someday be respectable, but the false ceremonial kind, worn by the gods, then the kings, and finally, when ambition gets loud enough, by those pretending to be both. You're summoned to a state offering at the Temple of Amun. You think it's just another formality, until the servant hands you a blue and gold linen headdress, and a false beard made of lacquered goat hair. You blink at it. The servant bows low and says, "By order of the Crown Prince to represent the Pharaoh in his absence." Ah, so this is the trap. To wear the beard is to accept the weight of authority. It's not just an accessory, it's a declaration. In this ceremony, the wearer stands in place of the living god, which means if things go well, Ramy takes the credit, and if something goes wrong, well, it's your face in the papyrus scrolls, isn't it? Still, you nod. Smile. Slide the piece over your chin and feel the weight of 1,000 years of paranoia settle across your throat. The temple is packed. Incense thickens the air into something you could chew. The chanting of priests rolls like distant thunder through the sandstone halls. As you step forward to pour the offering, an oil blend so expensive it smells like crushed sunlight, you catch Neferura watching from the gallery. She tilts her head just slightly as if to say, "You know what this means, don't you?" And oh yes, you do. Because here's the secret of Egyptian kingship no one ever says aloud. The power doesn't come from gods or blood. It comes from performance. You're only divine if enough people believe you are. It's theatre on a national scale. One misstep, one flicker of doubt, and the spell breaks. The king becomes a man again, a very mortal one. You pour the oil, offer the prayer, speak the words of renewal as generations have done before you, and when it's over, no lightning strikes, no statues weep, the gods don't object. But something else happens. People clap. It's not protocol. This ceremony is supposed to be solemn, sacred, but someone starts clapping, just one priest at first, then another. Then a small wave of polite applause. That's all it takes. You walk out of that temple different. Not officially, not even publicly. But in the eyes of a few key people, the right people, you just passed a test your brother never dared take. You're back in your chamber that evening, the ceremonial beard now resting like a dead thing on your writing desk, when Senbi knocks. He hasn't visited in weeks. "I heard you represented the Pharaoh," he says, almost teasing. "How did it feel to be divine for an hour? Hot, you say. Heavy." He chuckles, but only briefly. That's the truth of it. Then he sits beside you, uninvited, and looks down at the beard. "You know what they do when a new king is crowned?" he asks. "Throw a feast? They bury his enemies alive." You look at him. He's serious. Not always, he adds, but often enough that it becomes tradition. You can't build a clean reign on old grudges. The afterlife is a bureaucracy. Even the gods prefer neat records. You swallow. "I don't have enemies," Senbi smirks. "Then you're not aiming high enough." The next few weeks pass in strange balance. You remain in the shadows, but the palace begins shifting in subtle ways. The servants are slower to obey Ramy. The guards nod a little longer when you pass. The merchants speak to you with more urgency in their voices. Your father, the pharaoh, grows quieter. His public appearances dwindling, his health a hushed topic. You suspect he knows exactly what's happening, and he's choosing not to interfere. One afternoon, Neferura corners you in the garden. "You're making ripples," she says. "People are talking." "I'm not doing anything," you reply. "Exactly, and that scares them more." She looks tired, paler than usual. The gold in her collar seems to weigh on her shoulders. "I think Ramy suspects," she says. "He's always suspected." "No," she says, looking round before lowering her voice. "I mean, he's planning something final. That night you sleep poorly. You dream of the temple again, of pouring oil, but the oil turns to blood. The crowd claps harder. You turn to look at your face in the polished altar, and you're wearing the beard again, but it's fused to your skin. You try to rip it off, but it won't budge. It's become part of you. When you wake, there's a message waiting. An invitation to Ramy's compound on the West Bank. A private feast. Just family. You stare at the papyrus for a long time. Because let's be honest, this is how people die. You consider refusing, but that's also dangerous. Ramy expects you to show fear. If you don't go, he'll assume you're already scheming against him. If you do go, well, you've read enough scrolls to know how a royal dinner can turn into a funeral with very little notice. You go, you ride across the Nile at dusk. The barge is silent, save for the oars slicing through water that looks more like melted bronze than river. The western bank looms ahead, less cultivated, more ancient. Tombs built into cliffs, rocks carved with warnings in old script. The air feels older here, hungrier. Ramy's compound is opulent, too opulent. You could feed a city with the wine he's poured tonight. The walls are painted with scenes of him smiting enemies who don't exist. Lions pace behind caged gold bars, an unnecessary reminder of power. He greets you with a grin and too many rings. "Brother," he says, pulling you into an embrace that lasts just a heartbeat too long. "We've so much to celebrate." You smile. Keep your arms relaxed, don't tense. That's what they watch for. The feast is lavish. Dates stuffed with honeyed nuts, steamed quail, baskets of figs and cheese. You pretend to eat, just enough to blend in. You keep your wine untouched. Ramy talks too much. Jokes about old training injuries, about your childhood tantrums, about the time he nearly drowned you during a river game. Everyone laughs, including you. And then, near the end, he lifts his cup. "A toast," he says, eyes glinting. "To family. To the line of Horus. To those who know their place in the order of things." Everyone raises their cups. You raise yours. You don't drink. Neither does Neferura. Across the table, her hand trembles once. That's all the confirmation you need. So you smile, warmly, brotherly, and say nothing, because this is a war of performance, and tonight you're playing the part of a loyal sibling. But tomorrow you begin the final act. By dawn, the Nile looks harmless again, that glassy, lazy kind of peaceful you've come to mistrust, the kind that hides crocodiles just beneath the surface. You watch it from the palace balcony with a bowl of pomegranate seeds in your lap, crunching slowly while the wind pushes at the hem of your linen robe. Last night's feast was all smiles and subtle threats, but today the air around you feels charged. Not stormy yet, but something's coming. You can feel it like static against your skin. The feast was a test, of nerve, of loyalty, maybe even of poison tolerance. If Ramy meant to kill you, he failed. Or maybe he was only watching to see if you'd drink first. You didn't. And now, just as you predicted, the palace is beginning to treat you differently. Servants keep their eyes lowered just a moment longer. 2 guards switch their positions outside your chamber. You overhear one of the priests saying your name during a morning prayer. And your father, the Pharaoh, he sends for you for the first time in weeks. You enter the royal chamber cautiously, stepping over inlaid gold tiles that depict scenes of his military triumphs, back when his eyes were clear and his arms strong. Now he reclines on a couch of cedar and ivory, propped up by pillows and wheezing softly between sentences. His crown is beside him, not on his head. A subtle but critical shift. He motions for you to sit. "You've grown taller," he says. "Thinner too," you nod. "I've been studying more." "Good," he murmurs. "There will be much to remember." That catches your attention. You wait, but he doesn't elaborate. He stares out the window, where the sky is streaked with the colours of a bruised papyrus. Purples, yellows, orange bleeding into gold. "When I was your age," he says slowly, "I had 4 brothers. All of them wanted the crown. 3 died in accidents. 1 disappeared in the desert. I suppose he might still be out there whispering curses to the sand." You wait again. "There is no clean way to pass the crown," he says at last. "Only cleaner than the last time." He turns to look at you, his eyes sunken but sharp. "I've watched you. You think I don't, but I do." Your heart thumps once. "You're patient. That makes you dangerous." You don't respond. You can't think of a safe response. He waves a hand. "Go. Tell your sister to stop sending spies into my garden. It's not her finest strategy." And just like that, the conversation ends. You walk out heavier than when you entered. That same day, word comes that the high priest of Amun has fallen ill, which means there will be no ceremonies for at least a week, which also means no distractions. The palace, stripped of its usual rhythm of offerings and processions, feels exposed. The illusion of divine order has cracks in it now, and the people who live by those rituals are restless. It's the perfect time for whispers to get louder, and get louder they do. The vizier delivers a scroll to your chamber late that night, sealed with a smear of black wax. Inside is a single name, Akhenaten. You know the name, barely. A mid-ranking military officer stationed on the eastern frontier, known for his loyalty to your father, not particularly fond of Ramy. According to the margin notes scrawled in the vizier's neat, blocky handwriting, Akhenaten is travelling north in 2 days with a company of soldiers. A diplomatic mission, they say. But the vizier adds a line. If he were delayed, the garrison might ask why. The message is clear. Delay Akhenaten, and questions begin to rise. Questions about leadership, about strategy, about Ramy's hold on the military. It's subtle, but it plants a seed. You don't speak to Akhenaten directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, you make a show of requesting a minor blessing for his journey, something that requires a priestly review, a ceremonial delay. A small formality, you insist. The kind of pointless ritual the bureaucracy of Egypt thrives on. It works. The garrison stirs. Ramy is informed. He sends a sharp message back, furious that a student of scrolls is interfering in military matters, but he doesn't come to confront you himself, because he knows what it would look like. Instead, he sends Neferura. She arrives in your chamber just before midnight, wrapped in a linen cloak, hair loose, eyes darker than usual. "You're pushing him," she says without preamble. "He's losing patience." "Good," you reply calmly. "That means he's reacting." Neferura sits without being asked. She looks around your chamber like she's trying to memorize the shadows. Then finally she speaks again. "You know what happens if he falls?" You nod. "We all fall with him." "No," she says firmly. "You fall, I survive." You look at her. There's no anger in her voice, just a cold, clear acceptance. "Because I'm already part of him," she explains. "My blood is tied to his through marriage. I become the mourning widow, the devoted sister. I inherit the narrative." You stare at her, stunned by the honesty. "And you," she adds, "you become the usurper, the second son, the backup plan that went too far." The worst part? She's right. Even if you win, especially if you win, you lose. Egypt doesn't favour clever princes, it favours myths, stories of divine inheritance, not subtle manipulation. And Ramy, with his flashy rituals and military parades, is a myth. You're just a man who read too many scrolls. But then, you've always been a fan of revision. "What if the story changes?" you ask. She tilts her head. "To what?" "To the brother who stepped up when the gods went quiet, when the crops failed, when the priests fell sick, when the Nile ran too low." Neferura studies you. "And what will you do?" she asks softly. "When the story demands blood?" You say nothing, but in your mind you already know the answer. The next day the vizier approaches you with news. The priests of Thoth, keepers of record and knowledge, have received a dream, a shared vision they claim, a falcon with broken wings, a lion devouring its own cub, and a cobra coiled around a sun disk, waiting to strike. Omens. Maybe they believe it, maybe they don't, but they're talking about it, loudly, and talk is power. That night Ramy disappears for several hours. When he returns, his face is different. Something's hardened in him. His charm has faded to something brittle. There's a rumour the lions at his compound have been fed something unusual, something red. You sleep with your dagger closer now, and dream of the temple again. But this time, when you look into the polished altar, you're not wearing the beard, you're wearing the crown. And in the reflection behind you, Ramy is on his knees, bleeding. The first thing you notice the next morning is the silence. Not the peaceful kind either. It's that taut, watchful silence, the kind that spreads just before something collapses. No birdsong, no laughter in the servants' courtyard. Even the palace cats are quiet. You sit up slowly, already knowing. Something happened. You don't need to wait long. Senbi appears at your door with no ceremony, no scroll, no polite cough to announce his presence. His face is tight. He closes the door behind him and lowers his voice to a sharp whisper. "There's been a death." You freeze. "Who?" "Ma'atka." You blink. "Ramy's steward?" Senbi nods. "Found in his chambers this morning. No wounds, no signs of illness. Just dead." That in itself isn't what chills you. Royal stewards are expendable, and Matkar wasn't even particularly influential, just one of the many links in Ramy's long, gold-plated chain of loyalty. But that's what makes it strange. The timing, the quietness. No official announcement, no temple rites. Just a hushed death and a sealed room. They're saying it was a curse, Senbi adds. The priests of Thoth. You raise an eyebrow. And what do you say? He looks at you, eyes dark as wet ash. I say your brother is sending messages. Ah, you nod slowly. Messages are safer than assassinations. They let people imagine their own reasons to be afraid. A man dies mysteriously and suddenly everyone around him reconsiders their loyalties. You don't have to kill 20 men. You kill one and let the silence do the rest. You spend the day wrapped in ceremonial tasks, inspections of temple repairs, blessings of incoming tribute, a painfully slow reed-counting ritual that seems designed solely to bore you into submission. All while Ramy remains conspicuously absent. Neferura, too. By evening, the sun hangs low and mean over the courtyard, casting long, sharp-edged shadows. You're halfway through reciting a list of ceremonial tax exemptions when a messenger runs in. He doesn't speak. He kneels and hands you a folded strip of papyrus. You recognize the script instantly. Neferura. Do not return to your chamber tonight. He has made his decision. You fold the message without a sound, without a blink. You dismiss the messenger. You finish the ceremonial reading like nothing has changed, but everything has. By the time the stars blink out over the palace, you've vanished. Well, they think you've vanished. In truth, you're beneath the palace, in the old hallways used by embalming priests and architects, tunnels of stone and salt where ancient fires once burned and no one dares walk without a guide. You're not alone. Senbi walks beside you, a torch in hand, his expression unreadable. He's not subtle, he murmurs, but he's thorough. Your guards were replaced at sunset. Your wine was laced. Your bedding was shifted. There was a small blade sewn into the underside of your mattress. I'm guessing he wanted it to look like a panicked suicide. You say nothing. You're too busy breathing. Because this isn't just sibling rivalry anymore, this is a full hunt. And tonight, you are the prey. It's a strange thing, realizing someone has plotted your death so intimately. Ramy didn't want to just kill you. He wanted to control the story. He wanted mourners, weeping priests, a tragic tale of a prince who couldn't handle the pressure of divine duty. He wanted a clean ending. And that, above all, cannot be allowed. You spend the next 2 nights in hiding, not in caves or distant provinces, just cleverly misplaced. A servant's room beneath the temple, a forgotten alcove in the royal archives. You're seen by no one, but you see everything. You hear the whisper that you've gone missing, that your guards claim you left after sunset and never returned, that your chamber has been sealed out of respect, that Ramy made a public prayer for your safe return but ordered his soldiers to patrol the Nile for a body. He's crafting your absence with alarming speed. Scribes are no doubt already preparing your funerary inscription, but no body means no certainty, and certainty is what a crown needs. Neferura finds you the 3rd night. She's cloaked, angry, and barefoot. Her voice is sharp and low as she pushes past a curtain of the reeds. Do you want to die or not? You stare at her. That was a genuine question, she says. Because if you plan to keep sitting in this dusty hole playing dead, I need to know now so I can distance myself. You smile faintly. I'm touched. She kneels in front of you and grabs your wrist, harder than necessary. Listen to me, she hisses. Ramy doesn't just want your death. He wants your role, the quiet, cautious prince, the one who's always watching. He's trying to be you. He's mimicking your walk, quoting old prayers, smiling less. He thinks it'll make him seem wise. You blink. That's deranged, she shrugs. He's losing his mind, and that's when he's most dangerous. You exhale slowly. What do I do? Her hand loosens. You do what you've always done. You wait, you listen, and then, when the moment is right, you speak. The vizier appears the next morning. He sits with you for a long time before saying anything. Then finally he places a carved jackal figurine in your palm. Your father is dying, he says softly. You nod. You'd suspected as much. The final omen always comes quietly. He asked for you last night. I wasn't available. The vizier snorts. He said you'd say that. And then he stands, smoothing his robe. There's an eclipse coming, he says over his shoulder. The priests are in a frenzy. It will be visible across all of Thebes. The last one marked the death of your grandfather. You look at him. And what will this one mark? He smiles faintly. That depends on whether you're dead or not. And just like that, the plan becomes clear, because an eclipse is more than an astronomical event. It's a reset, a rare and potent moment when the gods turn their faces away, a pause in fate, a gap in destiny where anything can happen and be believed. You return to the palace the night before the eclipse, not in secret, not in shadows. You walk through the front gate dressed in plain linen, escorted by 2 temple guards, and you demand to see the pharaoh. The court erupts. Ramy tries to speak, but you raise your hand, and then you kneel beside your father's bed, and he opens his eyes one last time, and you say, "I was not gone. I was waiting." He smiles, just barely, then dies, and outside the moon begins to swallow the sun. The eclipse begins like a whisper, slow, creeping, unnoticed by most at first. The priests pace the temple courtyards with anxious glances skyward, and the crowd in Thebes grows restless as the warmth of the sun fades. You're still kneeling beside your father's body, watching the last flicker of life drain from eyes that once saw gods and wars and too many suns. His hand is still in yours. It's cold now, not with death, but with release. As if his soul, whatever that might be, is grateful to be free from this sand-crusted chessboard you all call home. He's gone. And for the first time in your life, you're not entirely sure what role to play. The chamber around you shifts like breath being held. Ramy stands by the door, too still, too quiet. His mouth is set in that polished court smile of his, but his eyes betray the twitch of calculation. Neferura, arms crossed and veil lowered, says nothing. Even the vizier waits in the shadow of a pillar, watching everything like a hawk god carved from salt. You stand, slowly. You don't cry. That would be foolish. Worse, it would be weak. A priest begins the death rite. Others light incense. The pharaoh is gone, but the ritual spins onward like a wheel already in motion. There's no pause, no real moment to grieve. His titles are recited, his name multiplied in every tongue known to Egypt. And in the corner of your eye you see Ramy mouthing the words as if already practicing them for himself. You don't interrupt. Not yet. There's a better stage waiting outside. When you finally step into the palace courtyard, it's like walking into another world. The eclipse is at its peak. The sky has turned the colour of old bruises, purples and sickly yellows, a rim of light around a blackened sun. People in the streets chant prayers. Some are crying, some are kneeling. Birds fly in confused spirals. Even the cats have vanished. You feel it too, that strange pull in your chest, like the gods have stopped listening for a moment and are just watching. Perfect. You let the rumours do the work. They're already swirling like dust devils. The prince was dead. No, he was in hiding. No, he returned at the moment of the eclipse. You don't correct anyone. You let the mystery build. The servants won't look you in the eye. The soldiers glance at you and then look away like your gaze might burn them. Neferura walks 3 steps behind you now, silent. And Ramy? Ramy doesn't speak to you at all. Not at first. When he does, it's in the great hall, during the interim mourning ceremony, before your father's body is placed in its golden sarcophagus. He intercepts you mid-procession, arm brushing yours, breath sharp with wine and whatever concoction he's been using to sleep. You think this is yours, he whispers, just for you. But it's not. You haven't earned it. You're not strong enough. You glance at him. You tried to kill me. And you lived, he says, which makes us even. You consider him. Consider the lion compound, the blade under the bed, the wine. No, you reply, voice low. It makes you sloppy. He flinches, just a bit. Enough. The vizier approaches then, perfectly timed as always. He bows to you both as equals. Technically, at this moment, neither of you is pharaoh. That requires ceremony, coronation, approval of the gods, the priests, the people. But symbolically, everyone's already watching the two of you like you've both already taken the throne. That night the stars return. The sun reappears, and with it, order. The eclipse passes. The gods resume their posts, but something fundamental has changed. You're not a boy anymore. You're not the second son. You're not the forgotten prince who reads too many scrolls. You are the question. And Egypt, it turns out, is hungry for a new answer. Over the next 3 days, the palace moves with the speed of a hunting cat. The preparations for burial begin immediately, months of planning compressed into hours. The priests of Anubis swarm like ants, black-robed and meticulous. Linen, resin, amulets. A solid gold death mask is shaped to match your father's features, though not entirely. Somehow it looks younger, stronger, idealized. That's the point, of course. Pharaohs never die. They ascend. And in the background, the power struggle begins in earnest. You're not invited to certain meetings now. Ramy takes them in private with temple officials. He writes decrees with shaky hands, already assuming the crown will simply fall onto his head like a ripe fig. Neferura's movements are less traceable. Whispers say she's seeking divine interpretation from the oracles, others that she's aligning with priestesses in the southern provinces. You ask Senbi what he thinks. She's hedging, he says. She knows Ramy might fall. She's trying not to fool with him. You walk more carefully now. You speak less. You observe. And at night, you return to the archives. Not to read this time, to erase. There's a record, a quiet one, of a priest accused of treason decades ago. He tried to undermine the coronation of the heir, suggesting a younger sibling was more aligned with Ma'at. He was executed, and the sibling, she never ruled. You take a fine knife and scrape the name of that priest off the scroll. Then you adjust the entry, ever so slightly. Now, the priest supported the coronation. You write another scroll, more recent. A list of royal duties performed by the heir in his father's final year. You add your name beside 3 of the ceremonial roles. Quietly, falsely. But truth you've learned is mostly repetition. People believe what they see written, and what they see whispered. You attend every ritual now, every procession. You bless the vessels. You lift the incense. You speak the words as if you were born for them. And the people begin to murmur, not if, when. Ramy lashes out. At dawn, 3 scribes are arrested. One is executed before breakfast, publicly. The charges are vague. Something about falsifying royal records. You say nothing. You show concern. You tell the vizier, privately, that perhaps Ramy is overreacting. The vizier nods but doesn't answer, because by now he's made his choice too. Everyone has. You sleep little. When you do, it's always the same dream. The temple, the beard, the altar, and behind you, a crowd that bows as one, but not to Ramy, to you. There's a story told in the back alleys of Thebes, one whispered after dark when the fires burned low and no priests are within earshot. It's about a pharaoh who was buried without his heart, not by accident, deliberately. They say his enemies cut it out before embalming, hid it in a jar never labelled, never blessed, never even sealed. Why? Because without a heart the soul cannot pass the judgment of Osiris. The scales can't balance, you don't get your afterlife, you're stuck forever. It's a cruel story, a petty one, but it sticks with you. Because that's how revenge works in Egypt. It doesn't always arrive in thunder and blood. Sometimes it's slow and quiet and woven into the fabric of eternity. And lately you've started weaving. Your father's funeral takes place under a sky as clear and brutal as polished flint. The heat rolls off the stones in waves. The crowd is enormous. Nobles from across the 2 lands, priests in every colour of godhood, foreign emissaries sweating through their gold-threaded tunics. The funeral bark, carved from cedar and lacquered in pitch-black resin, is pulled through the crowd like a divine chariot. At the bow stands a golden statue of the dead pharaoh, arms crossed, crook and flail shining in the sun. His mask watches everything, a serene lie of eternal peace. You walk behind it, so does Ramy. Neferura takes her place beside the high priest, veiled and weeping, a performance she's perfected. And you, well, you don't need to pretend. The weight of your father's death isn't the loss of a man. It's the loss of your last buffer, the last person who stood between you and the blade that everyone now carries in their smiles. The tomb lies deep beneath the Valley of the Kings. Not the largest, but one of the most intricate. Its walls are already painted with scenes from the Amduat, the journey through the 12 hours of night. You walk past images of fire serpents, star demons, and the boat of Rhea sailing across the underworld. It's meant to comfort, to remind everyone that kings do not die, they transform. You're not comforted, not when you reach the burial chamber, not when they lower the sarcophagus, not even when the high priest seals the tomb with a prayer older than papyrus itself. Because this isn't an ending, it's a signal, and you can feel it rising through the dust. When you return to the palace, everything is quieter, but not in the way that suggests peace. It's the quiet of people waiting, listening, measuring how the air has changed. Ramy holds court the next morning seated on a lesser throne, a symbolic gesture until his coronation is approved. He makes declarations about grain distribution and temple maintenance. No one really listens. You stand nearby, arms folded, offering no challenges. But the room leans toward you. It's subtle. Body language. Gaze direction. Even silence has weight, and you're starting to realise just how heavy yours is. A week passes, then 2. No coronation. The priests say they must consult omens. The eclipse, they say, still casts uncertainty. There are murmurs of a delay in constructing Ramy's coronation bark, a dispute over the temple where he'll receive the crown. In truth, no one wants to crown him. Not yet. Maybe not at all. That's when the first rumour surfaces. A boy, 10 years old, found dead in a Theban side alley. Nothing unusual there, sadly. Egypt loses plenty of children to sickness, to hunger, to the 1,000 dangers that come with being fragile in a hard world. But this boy wore a pendant, an amulet of Horus, one only given to the children of noble houses, and his throat bore a thin, deliberate line. Not a mugging, a message. It doesn't reach the official record, but it reaches you. You know what it is. Ramy is hunting sympathy. When power doesn't come from fear, it must come from grief. A dead child, possibly his own illegitimate son, possibly just an orphan dressed for the role, makes him seem human, vulnerable, hurting, a future king who bleeds like everyone else. You don't speak of it publicly, but privately you make sure 3 temple scribes receive anonymous messages. Each says the same thing. How did the boy die, and why was he carrying a royal amulet? Simple questions. But in Egypt, questions bloom into legends. You begin stepping out more, visiting temples, offering prayers. You greet the people with gentle nods, kind words, nothing dramatic, just visible, present, not trying to rule, just there. And every time you speak, someone listens. That's when Ramy breaks the silence. He invites you to a private hunt. It's the most dangerous thing he's done yet. Because royal hunts are tradition. Brothers ride together, side by side, chasing gazelle through the dunes, laughing like gods in human skins. But they also offer the perfect opportunity for a fatal accident. A startled horse, a poorly loosed arrow, a broken neck on a steep ridge. You say yes, of course. Neferura tries to stop you. She visits your chamber the night before the hunt. Her hair is braided like it was when you were both children, and for a brief moment she looks small again. Fragile. Real. He won't fail twice, she says. You sip your date wine, watching her over the rim of your cup. No, you agree, he won't. She sets something on the table before leaving. A carved figurine of Sekhmet, lioness goddess of war and vengeance. You don't ask where she got it. You already know. The hunt takes place in the red hills west of the river. Dry. Brutal. The kind of landscape where blood vanishes into sand within minutes. You ride side by side, surrounded by guards who are too well armed for mere antelope. Ramy smiles. Tells you stories. Reminds you of that time he saved you from drowning as a child. You nod, smile, match his tone. And when he pulls ahead on his horse, aiming his bow at a sprinting ibex, you draw your own. Not at the animal. At him. You don't fire, not yet. But you watch. You watch as he misses. As the arrow skims wide and the ibex disappears into the rocks. You watch his fingers tremble. And you know. He knows it too. You ride back in silence. The next morning you wake to news. The priests of Amun have declared that the eclipse marked the end of an era, not the beginning of a new one. They recommend pause, reflection. It's not a denial of Ramy, but it's not a blessing either. Later that day, the vizier brings you a folded scroll. You open it to find only a single line. The gods are looking elsewhere now. You fold it, burn it, and begin to write your own name, just once, on a blank cartouche. For practice. You dream of water again. Not the gentle lull of the Nile this time, but the dark, furious surge of floodwaters. A rushing tide that pounds through the Valley of the Kings, sweeping statues from their pedestals and pulling open tombs like cracked eggshells. You stand waist-deep in the current, clutching a scroll that dissolves in your hands as the ink runs down your arms like blood. Behind you, a voice says, "This is how memory ends." You wake before the sun. The palace is still asleep, wrapped in the rare quiet that only comes in the hours just before light. You sit by the window, watching the horizon shift from indigo to gold, and you realise how much of your life now exists in the space between night and morning. Always in waiting. Always between roles. Too powerful to be ignored, too dangerous to be trusted. It's around this time that people begin disappearing. Not dramatically, no shouting, no arrests, no bodies in the Nile, just absences. One morning, a court scribe isn't at his usual post near the temple gate. 2 days later, a minor nobleman who once toasted Ramy a bit too loudly fails to appear at dinner. Then a priest, a young one not yet sworn, misses his initiation ceremony. He was last seen near Ramy's private garden. Each disappearance is small, quiet. But collectively, they make a whole. The quiet kind of fear starts to thread itself through the palace halls, and you can feel it tightening like a net. You bring it to the vizier, carefully. "I'm noticing gaps," you say, tracing patterns on the map of palace personnel. He nods. "So am I, but nothing that can be proved." You let that hang between you, then you ask, "Is it Ramy?" The vizier doesn't answer directly. Instead, he offers you a cup of beer and a carved wooden game board. The game of Senet. The same one your father used to play before dinner. Its rules as old as the gods themselves. You sit. Begin playing. It's not about winning. It's about the message. The vizier moves a piece forward, then glances at you. "Power," he says, "has one real weakness." You wait. "Proof." Another move. "If you kill someone too obviously, the gods get angry. If you kill them too quietly, no one learns their lesson." He slides a piece off the board. "But if you remove someone and no one knows who did it or why, that's when fear does your work for you." You realise then that these disappearances are more than strategy. They're erosion. Ramy isn't trying to destroy the palace. He's trying to rot it from within, to make it paranoid, unstable, so that when he steps in, when he offers control, it feels like salvation. You play your piece. "I don't want fear," you say. "No," the vizier agrees. "You want loyalty." You look up. "How do I earn that?" He smiles. "You save someone." The opportunity arrives sooner than you expect. A girl, a servant's daughter, maybe 12 years old, is caught sneaking fruit from the temple storeroom. Theft, even small, is considered a spiritual offence. In most cases, she'd be beaten, maybe branded. If she's unlucky, she disappears. You intervene. You stand in front of the temple guards as they drag her forward. You order her released. You offer her a place in the kitchen staff where she can earn her meals. You invoke mat, balance, justice, mercy. You do it publicly, loud enough that the scribes take note. It's a tiny gesture, almost meaningless. But the girl's mother cries, and one of the guards, older, tired, scarred, meets your eyes and nods, just once. It's the first moment you've felt like a ruler. Later, Neferua finds you on the palace roof. It's dusk and the sun is melting into the horizon, casting everything in gold that feels more funeral than triumph. She doesn't speak right away. Then, "You're becoming very good at this." "At what?" "Pretending to be humble while plotting your brother's downfall," you sigh. "I'm not pretending to be humble." She laughs. It's sharp, tired. "Yes, you are, and that's fine. It's a useful skill." You turn to face her. "Do you think I want the throne?" She considers that, then shrugs. "I think you want Egypt not to bleed, and you're the only one willing to pick up the knife to stop it." You both stand in silence after that. Below you, the city exhales. The calls of fishermen on the river, the laughter of children near the market, the hollow ring of temple bells marking the start of evening prayers. Life, fragile and constant, pulsing on despite everything, and above you, stars, just beginning to pierce the sky. That night, a messenger from the southern provinces arrives. He carries troubling news, rumours of revolt in the far reaches of the kingdom. Tax collectors attacked, priests ignored. One local temple even declared their support for a different line of succession. You ask what they mean by that. He says they think Ramy is cursed. They're calling it the son of the eclipse. You feel it like a punch to the ribs, because that wasn't your doing, that came from the people. A superstition born in the dirt, in the empty bellies of farmers and the prayers of widows. You didn't start it, but you can use it. You meet with the vizier and Senbi in the old library, where the papyrus scrolls still carry the scent of resin and dust. You speak low, but with more confidence than ever. "We need to move. Zenbi frowns. Now? The priests are hesitating, the south is whispering, the court is fracturing. You look between them. We don't need to take the crown. Pause. We just need to make them afraid of what happens if he does. They say nothing, but they don't argue. Over the next few days, strange things begin to happen. A statue of Horus near the palace gates falls overnight, its head snapping clean off. A shipment of grain meant for Ramy's feast is spoiled. Rats, they say, though some suspect sabotage. A prophecy surfaces from the oracle of Nekhen. Beware the lion with honey on his tongue. He bites before he roars. Everyone knows who it's about. And then Ramy strikes back, not with violence, with spectacle. He hosts a massive feast, inviting everyone from generals to kitchen boys. He dresses in full regalia, even dares to wear the false beard of Osiris. He sings, he dances, he makes offerings. And in the middle of it all, he pulls a child from the crowd, a boy from the temple schools. This, he says, is what the next generation looks like. Not fear, not doubt, but joy. People cheer, you smile, but you see it. You see the boy's forced grin, the slight tremble in his arm, and the way Ramy holds him just a little too tight. Afterward you send your final message to the vizier, just 3 words. Begin the unravelling. Because fear is powerful, but faith, when cracked, spreads like wildfire through the tomb-dry bones of an empire. And Ramy? He's standing on a floor that's already starting to give. You never see the first wave of collapse. No one does. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or rebellion banners or even a dramatic outcry from a trembling priest. It starts smaller, quieter, like hairline fractures in a statue. At first, the face still looks whole, still serene, still divine. But then the light shifts, and you see the cracks. You see them everywhere. The unravelling begins in the West Barracks. A group of soldiers there, newly rotated from the southern provinces, refuse to swear loyalty to Ramy. Not openly, just through inaction. They stop repeating his name in the morning rites. They omit his title from reports. They bow, yes, but it's that shallow, perfunctory kind of bow that says, we're doing this because we have to, not because we believe. Ramy sends a messenger to discipline them. The messenger never returns. Then, a week later, temple artisans halt their work on his coronation bark. They claim a bad omen, a cracked plank of sacred cedar, split down the centre despite being recently blessed. The head carpenter takes ill the same night. Some say it was fever, others whisper it was fear. Ramy dismisses it all as coincidence. A test of faith. The gods, he declares, are always testing those who dare to rise. But you know better. Because this wasn't your plan exactly. You didn't command disobedience. You didn't bribe the carpenters. You didn't even whisper to the soldiers. You just waited. And Egypt, as it turns out, is very good at taking hints. One night, Neferura arrives unannounced. She doesn't speak right away, just sits beside you in the archives, where you've been half reading a scroll on Nile flood patterns and half listening for approaching footsteps. Finally, she says, "You've turned him into a ghost before he even died." You look up. It wasn't hard. He's done most of it himself. She toys with a carved ivory seal between her fingers. You understand what's coming, don't you? This doesn't end with him fading away. I know. She doesn't meet your gaze. Then what are you waiting for? You don't answer. Because honestly, you're not sure. Maybe you're waiting for the people to demand it. Maybe you're waiting for the gods to speak more clearly. Maybe you're just scared. Not of Ramy, of what it means to win. Because victory in Egypt comes with curses. Ask Hatshepsut. You've read her story 100 times. The woman pharaoh, bold and brilliant, who ruled as king in a time of doubt. She built temples, expanded trade, kept peace. And after her death? Her name was carved out of monuments, her statues buried, her memory chiselled away, by her own stepson no less, Thutmose III, the Golden Warrior, the son of legacy. No official records explain why. Some scholars say it was vengeance, others say it was political necessity, a way to restore natural order after a woman dared wear the beard of kingship. You stare at the scrolls long after Neferura leaves, wondering if someday your own face will be chipped from a wall, your name turned to dust. You think of all the tombs where statues stand headless. That's how they rewrite history here. One blow to the neck, and centuries fall apart. but by the end of the week, the decision is made for you. The priests of Amun send a formal petition. They request a revision of succession, a bloodless term, carefully worded, rolled and sealed and escorted by 4 temple, scribes who keep their eyes down as they hand you the scroll. You don't open it in front of them. You don't need to. Their mere presence in your chamber says enough. They're choosing you. That evening, you take a walk through the palace gardens, the same gardens where you used to play with Ramy, where Seti once tripped over a ceremonial urn and cried until you gave him your favourite toy, where Neferura first taught you how to read between the lines of a prayer. Everything feels smaller now, quieter, and when you reach the lotus pond, you see someone already waiting, Ramy. He's seated on the edge of the stone basin, one hand idly trailing through the water. His beard is unkempt, his eyes bloodshot, the linen of his robe creased, stained with something dark near the sleeve. You don't speak, neither does he. Not at first. Then he says, "Do you remember when Father took us here after the drought?" You nod. "He told us that when the Nile fails, Egypt begins to eat itself." You sit down beside him. "He was right," Ramy says. "It's happening again." He doesn't look at you when he adds, "I've lost." You say nothing. He laughs, softly, bitterly. "You didn't even have to kill me. You just let me die." You want to deny it, to tell him you fought fair, that you earned this, but it would be a lie. You just waited for Egypt to make its choice. You rose when he fell. "Neferura says you'll be a good king," Ramy mutters. "She told me the same," you reply. He finally turns to you. There's no hate left in his eyes, just weariness. "You'll erase me, won't you?" "No," a pause. "But I might rename you." Another bitter laugh. "Of course." You stand. He doesn't follow. That night, the official decree is issued. The coronation of Prince Your Name, heir of Pharaoh, chosen of Maat, voice of Horus. The date is set. Ramy isn't exiled. He's retired ceremonially. Sent to advise from afar, a polite fiction everyone agrees to pretend is mercy. He walks out of the palace barefoot with no guards. Just Neferura, who kisses his cheek once before returning to you. "You'll need a consort soon," she says lightly. "Don't wait too long." You smile, but don't respond. Because there's still one more thing to do. You return to the archives that night, alone. You light a single lamp, pull down a blank scroll, and you begin to write. Let it be recorded. Because kings are made not in war or ceremony, but in memory, and you intend to write your own. It's strange how quiet the world becomes when it decides you're sacred. The morning of your coronation, the palace moves with the weight of ceremony, but it all feels muffled, like you're underwater. The servants glide like ghosts. Priests chant low and slow, their voices echoing off the limestone walls in languages only gods understand. You stand in your private chamber, watching your reflection in a polished obsidian mirror, and for the first time you see yourself the way others must. Draped in white and gold, eyes rimmed in ceremonial kohl, a striped Neem's headdress resting against your temples like a crown, already forming in the shadows. You look like a god. You feel like a coffin. Senbi appears with the final offering, a small alabaster jar sealed with beeswax and marked with the symbol for purity. "Perfumed oil," he says, "for the anointing." You reach for it automatically, but he holds it back. "Wait," he says, and there's something off in his voice. "We've had reports. Someone's been accessing the sacred scent stores. Without approval, you blink." "Who?" "We're not sure. But the high priest says the floral oils for the consort's chamber have been tampered with, mixed with something else. Something else. You already know what he means. The royal perfumes are sacred mixtures. Blue lotus, myrrh, frankincense and balm of Mihen. Only priests can touch them. But for centuries poisons have masqueraded as perfumes. A drop of oleander here, a touch of hemlock there, even scorpion venom distilled into musk. Ancient tricks. Forgotten to most. Except, apparently, to whoever still remembers. You take the jar from Senbi and turn it in your hand. It smells like ritual, like power, like danger hiding behind sweetness. "Should we delay the ceremony?" he asks. You don't hesitate. Number we move forward. Because here's the thing, Egypt doesn't pause for fear. Egypt only moves for spectacle. And today, you're the spectacle. The coronation procession begins just after dawn. You ride in the bark of the new king, wood from Byblos, gold from Nubia, a carved prow shaped like a falcon's head. drummers line the processional road. Priests scatter lotus petals at your feet. The people cheer. Some cry, some stare, uncertain, as if they still can't believe this boy, this quiet prince, this shadow, has become the sun. You pass the statues of your ancestors, eyes following you as if judging your worth. Ramses, Thutmose, Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, all the names you once studied like puzzles, now whispering from stone, waiting to see if yours will last. In the courtyard of the Temple of Amun, the final ritual begins. You step forward, heart pounding like a war drum, and kneel on the cold alabaster tiles. The priests chant. The high priest lifts the oil, the same jar you inspected, and anoints your brow, your shoulders, your hands. It stings slightly. You don't flinch. He speaks your new name. Not the one your mother gave you, but the one the gods require. It's long, winding, a storm of syllables. Beloved of Ra, chosen of Maat, he who brings the balance, the living Horus. It means everything. It means nothing. You rise. They place the false beard on your chin, the headdress on your brow, and finally the crown, the double crown, white of Upper Egypt, red of Lower. Together, it feels like it weighs the same as guilt. The people erupt, and just like that, you are Pharaoh, king of the two lands. You smile, and then you go back to your chamber and vomit, not from poison, from pressure. Senbi is waiting when you're done. He says nothing, just hands you a cloth and closes the window shutters. You sit on your carved stool, heart still pounding, and stare at your hands like you've never seen them before. Who would poison the consort's oils, you ask, voice hoarse. Senbi doesn't answer. Neferura. He finally speaks. She left this morning, before the ceremony, took a barge south. No word. You breathe out slowly. She knew. Or maybe she planned it. Or maybe she fled before someone tried the same trick on her. It doesn't matter. She's gone. You receive gifts that night. Mountains of them. Chests of lapis. Scarabs carved from green feldspar. Gold collars. Feathered fans. A monkey dressed in linen. It's all part of the theatre. Other nations recognizing your rule. Even Ramy sends a box. A dagger. Clean and curved, inscribed with the symbol of Set, the god of chaos. Touché. But the most curious gift comes without a name. A small jar of unmarked perfume. No seal, no note. Just the scent, something too sweet, too thick. You don't even need to open it to feel your stomach twist. You order it buried in the desert. Deep. Without record. That night, you dine alone. You don't trust the food. Not yet. You eat only figs and salted bread and drink wine you poured yourself. And even then, you think twice with every bite, because the crown isn't just a weight, it's a target. In the days that follow, you start to settle into your new role. Briefings, ceremonies, visits to the temples, the granaries, the military garrisons. You keep your tone measured. You listen more than you speak. You give people just enough to believe you're thoughtful, but never so much that they feel like you're deciding everything alone. Because that's the secret, isn't it? Pharaohs don't rule, they orchestrate. They make people believe they're part of something divine, something eternal. You're not a man now, you're a myth with sandals. But behind the scenes, you're still watching, still learning. And you discover that palace perfumes weren't the only things tampered with. Someone's been rewriting burial records, hiding names, adjusting lineages. Nothing that jumps off the scroll, but enough to muddy the succession trail, enough to cast doubt. It all leads back to the same place. A name, not Ramy. Your mother, of course. She never liked how fragile you looked as a child. She used to tell people your smile was too soft for a king. Maybe she thought she could force the line of succession towards someone stronger. Or maybe she just wanted to pick the story. You find one of her scribes late one evening, cornered in the scriptorium. You don't threaten. You don't raise your voice, you just ask. And he tells you everything. She paid him in spices and wine, small bribes, tiny edits, changes that seemed insignificant. One letter here, one date there. But they were enough to put Ramy first in certain records. Enough to erase your presence in key ceremonies. You sit alone afterward. You don't cry. You don't even rage. You just light a lamp and begin writing a new scroll. You dictate it carefully. A proclamation, not of punishment, not of guilt, but of forgetting. She will be removed from public ritual. Her name will remain in the private family tombs, untouched. But in the eyes of Egypt, she simply ceases to be. No shrines, no hymns, no statues. You don't destroy her memory, you place it in shadow. And that's worse, because here, in the land of gods and gold and stone, the only thing worse than death is being ignored. They whisper your name differently now, not in the reverent hush of prayer, not yet, but in that wary tone that lives somewhere between awe and suspicion, the sound people make when talking about storms on the horizon or crocodiles seen near the irrigation fields. You're not feared exactly, but you're no longer harmless, and that, in Egypt, is as much of a transformation as any god could manage. The official ceremonies continue. Day after day you're dragged through them like a statue on a litter. Blessings at dawn, offerings at noon, processions through the courtyards with flowers thrown at your feet, while priests chant your fivefold royal titulary as if the world might collapse if they miss a syllable. It's impressive, exhausting, a little ridiculous. You've started to see the throne for what it is, a golden cage lined with ritual, and the bars are shaped like the sun. That realization really hits you the first time you sit in the throne room alone. No court, no scribes, no priests rehearsing ancient titles. Just you and the seat. An ornate slab of ebony, gold and ivory carved with falcons and ankhs and more cobras than seems strictly necessary. It's cold beneath you. Hard. You lean back, and the sound of your own breathing echoes through the chamber like it doesn't quite belong. This was supposed to feel like power. Instead, it feels like performance art. Later that day, you receive another set of omens from the priesthood. You're informed that Ra has sent a vision. A single sun disk flickering like a torch in a storm, its rays tangled with smoke. The priest hesitates when reading it aloud. You nod like you understand, but really you think it sounds less like divine wisdom, and more like someone left the temple fire pit untended. But of course, no one says that aloud, because in Egypt belief is never just belief, it's politics. And lately the gods are playing favourites, and their favourite seems to be the sun, more specifically Aten. You hear the name again during a council meeting. A minor priest sweating through his linen robe nervously mentions that certain temples in Akhenaten, once forbidden to speak the name, are now whispering it again. That the solar cult of Akhenaten is gaining quiet traction in the south. That some priests are privately holding dual rituals, honouring both Amun and Aten just in case the divine winds shift. The vizier looks at you as this is said. He doesn't speak, but you understand the meaning behind his silence. This isn't just a religious ripple, it's a test. The Aten cult was buried years ago, erased, scrubbed from monuments, its temples shut and its followers scattered. Akhenaten, the heretic king, rewrote Egypt in the image of a single god, the sun disk. No statues, no idols, just light, and he paid the price. He died unloved. His memory was mutilated, his city fell to ruin, and now the idea returns, creeping back like a ghost that never believed in rest. You find yourself reading about him again. Akhenaten, born Amenhotep IV. Strange, elongated features in his statues, soft belly, curved hips. Some say he was sickly, others say he wanted to show a gentler image of the divine. Or maybe he was just different. Too different for Egypt's tight sacred order. He claimed Aten spoke to him directly. He moved the capital, changed the language, even changed the art, more flowing, more human, less stiff and perfect. He wanted truth. And in the process, he unbalanced everything. You think about that long into the night. Are you repeating him? The thought is unnerving, because for all your caution, your patience, your hours of calculated silence, you've already changed things. You've allowed the priest to hesitate. You've permitted whispers to survive. You didn't force belief, and now the door is cracked and something strange is coming through. Neferura would have warned you, but she's still gone. You don't know if she ran to avoid being a pawn, or if she's out there watching to see what kind of king you become. Either way, the silence between you grows longer every day, and so you do what you always do when the court grows louder than your thoughts. You leave it. You visit the scribes in the outer halls, listen to farmers describe drought patterns, inspect the canal repairs with your own eyes, and speak to the guards about the state of their barracks. Not because it's expected of you, but because it reminds you who actually keeps the kingdom from crumbling. Not the priests, not the nobles, not even the gods, the people. It's on one of these inspections that something odd happens. A woman, middle-aged, with sun-cracked skin and a voice like old papyrus kneels before you and offers a gift. Not gold, not perfume, a loaf of bread, still warm. You hesitate, but take it. She doesn't speak, just bows deeply and backs away without another word. You don't eat the bread, you can't, but you carry it back with you, because for the first time in days you feel like someone saw you. Not the crown, not the beard, not the falcon god incarnate, just you. That night you visit your father's tomb, not for ritual, just to sit. You kneel in front of his sealed sarcophagus, the torchlight flickering over his death mask, the silence thick with embalming salt and unsaid things. I didn't want this, you say aloud. It echoes. But I think I'm better at it than you were. You almost expect him to answer. He doesn't. So you talk. About the priests, about the Aten cult, about Ramy, about your mother, about the bread. And when you leave a scarab behind, a token, unmarked, plain stone. A reminder that kings are not only remembered for what they built, but also for what they chose to carry. Back at the palace, the festival of Hathor begins. Drinking, music, masks of cow goddesses painted with red wine. You don't dance, but you watch. And during the celebration, a merchant slips you a note. Not in secret, not in panic, just calm. Director. It reads, Akhenaten has lit its torches again. The sun does not forget, and your hands go cold, because if the Aten cult rises again, you'll have to choose. Crush it and become a tyrant. Let it live and become a heretic. Neither choice will leave your name untouched. And in Egypt, your name is all that survives. There are places in Egypt even the gods tread carefully. Akhenaten is one of them. It doesn't appear on most royal maps anymore. After Akhenaten's death, the city was abandoned, deserted like a bad dream. Sand swallowed the walls, the columns, the open courts once built to bathe in the sun. What was once meant to be a capital of clarity, a monument to light and devotion, became a ghost town before the paint had even faded from its pillars. But now, it stirs again, like something buried too shallow, like a heresy clawing its way back up through the dust. You reread the note from the merchant by the light of a flickering oil lamp. You've memorized the curve of every character, the way the scribe pressed harder on some strokes than others. You try to read intent in the script. Is it a warning, a threat, a plea? You don't know. What you do know is that the name Aten carries danger. Aten wasn't just a god. Aten was an idea. And ideas, as you've learned, are harder to kill than people. You meet with the vizier privately, behind drawn linen curtains, the air thick with incense and the distant hum of temple hymns. It's coming from the south, he says, not just Akhenaten, Nubian priests, merchants who follow solar calendars. They're not declaring allegiance openly, but the signs are there. The sun disk is appearing in temple graffiti again. You ask how serious it is. He gives you a look, that calm, deathless look he uses when he's about to hand you a moral dilemma with no clean edge. Serious enough that ignoring it will be seen as permission, too serious to crush it without backlash. He tells you the cult is gathering in secret. Early morning rituals, sunlight through open rooftops. No idols, no chants, no priests in jackal masks. Just a circle of believers and the rising sun. You stare at the floor, because it's beautiful in its own way. Pure, maybe even sincere, and that's what makes it dangerous. The old gods are complicated, layered. They require offerings, blood, festivals, gold, and a constant parade of priests to interpret their endless moods. But Aten just asks you to look up. You dismiss the vizier. He bows and leaves, saying nothing more. He knows you need time, and you do. Because this isn't about one cult. It's about Egypt's soul. You think back to the first time you saw Akhenaten's face. Not a painting, his statue. Elongated head, wide hips, gentle eyes. Not the face of a warrior. The face of a man trying to rewrite the rules of the world. You remember being disturbed, now you're not so sure. That night, you visit the palace library alone. You dig through records most people pretend don't exist. Scrolls with dust so thick they crumble at the edges when you touch them. You find what you're looking for wedged between two broken reed baskets. The hymn to the Aten. It's beautiful. No threats, no curses, no ritual slaughter. Just love. The kind that speaks of light touching every living thing, of the sun warming both rich and poor, both lion and mouse, of a god who needs no temple because the world is his temple. You close the scroll and press your forehead against the cool stone wall. You are Pharaoh now. You must decide what lives and what dies. And the problem is, you don't know if you believe in the old gods anymore. It's not blasphemy. Not exactly. You still perform the rituals, still offer wine to Amun, incense to Thoth, honey to Hathor. You still bow your head when the high priest recites the Book of the Dead. But your belief, it's become more like duty, a costume worn for the benefit of others. You wonder if that's how your father felt near the end. You order a quiet investigation, no arrests, no public action, just eyes. You send Senbi, because he's the only one who won't judge. He travels south disguised as a grain inspector. When he returns, he brings no scrolls, only words. It's spreading, he says, quietly but deeply. You nod. Some of them believe Akhenaten never died, that he became the sun itself, that you are his heir. That's unexpected. Is that what they want me to be, you ask? Senbi shrugs. They want something simple, something pure. They're tired of the temples, of corruption, of gods who demand so much and give so little. You feel it again, that tug behind the breastbone, that dangerous thing called sympathy. You tell Senbi to burn his robes and never speak of it again. That night you receive a letter from Ramy. It's unsigned, unsealed. But the handwriting is unmistakable. You're already one of them. They just don't know it yet. And when they find out, it won't be your enemies you'll need to worry about. It'll be your priests. You burn the letter, but not before copying it. You want to remember how clearly your brother saw you, even at the end. In the weeks that follow, the cult of Aten becomes the worst-kept secret in Thebes. People mention it in passing, with curiosity, not fear. Farmers say the sun rises brighter now. Merchants offer blessings to the disk and the day. It becomes fashionable. That's when you know it's dangerous, because in Egypt, gods aren't loved. They're followed, and Aten is beginning to lead. You're called before the high priest of Amun. He doesn't yell, he doesn't accuse, he simply places two items before you. A solar amulet in the shape of Aten, and a decree for its prohibition. You must choose, he says. You stare at the amulet. So simple. Just a circle, with rays-like fingers. You ask him what happens if you delay. He says nothing. You nod. And then, without another word, you reach for the decree. You sign it. The cult is outlawed. Temples are warned. Scribes are instructed to monitor solar iconography. It's the right thing to do. The politically correct thing. The religiously safe thing. But that night, you dream of Akhenaten again. He stands at the edge of the desert, wrapped in sunlight, holding nothing but an empty hand. He says, I wasn't wrong. I was just too early. And then he turns to dust. You wake up sweating. And for the first time in years, you don't light incense to the old gods. You just stand by the window, staring up at the sky and wait for the sun to rise. And when it does, you don't look away. You start dreaming in stone. Not just one dream, many. Repeating, overlapping, bleeding into each other like ink on wet papyrus. Always stone. Heavy blocks with ancient chisel marks. Walls half-built. Columns cracked but upright. Tombs missing names. Sometimes you're building something. Sometimes you're tearing it down. But every dream ends the same way, with a door you can't open and a voice behind it whispering your name like a warning. You stop sleeping well after that. And with poor sleep comes sharp clarity. The kind that slices through palace ceremony like a blade through linen. You see things you didn't before. Servants pretending to dust walls while listening too closely. Scribes with eyes just a little too still. Priests murmuring blessings while watching each other more than the gods. The palace has always been full of watchers, but now they're watching you. They want to know what kind of pharaoh you'll be, and what kind of afterlife you'll deserve. You're beginning to think they won't give you either, so you go underground. Not literally, though that's tempting, but figuratively, diplomatically. You start requesting updates from the necropolis staff, not through the vizier or the priests, directly. You send messengers to the craftsmen in Deir el-Medina, the small walled village where the tomb builders live, the artisans who carve eternity into limestone. Their hands shape the dreams of kings, and they've seen too much. At first they're wary. Most pharaohs never speak to them, only issue commands through temple channels, but you send no threats, no orders, only questions. How are the tombs? Is the stone good this year? What do the workers pray for at night? Eventually one of them sends back a reply. A scroll no bigger than your palm written in rough script. They pray not to be buried in the walls they build. It hits harder than you expect. Because that fear, it's real, not just a metaphor. You find out 2 weeks later that 3 workers have disappeared from a royal tomb site. Their names struck from the logs. Their families moved quietly out of Deir el-Medina and relocated to lesser towns. No explanation, no bodies. This isn't new. It's just older than you knew. There's always been a suspicion that tomb builders were silenced when they knew too much, where secret corridors led, which grave goods were real and which were fake, which pharaohs weren't quite dead yet when they were sealed inside. The ancient rumours tell of one group who were buried alive to protect a chamber's location. It's dismissed as myth by priests and laughed off by scribes. But the laughter always stops a little too abruptly. You decide to visit the valley yourself, not with trumpets and guards. Quietly, in plain robes, accompanied by only 2 of your most trusted men, Senbi, naturally, and a young architect named Kayem who speaks more with his hands than his mouth. You ride out at dawn, the light still golden and soft, the Nile to your right, and the desert to your left. The city fades behind you. Ahead, the cliffs rise like broken teeth, and the Valley of the Kings stretches out in silence. Even the wind holds its breath here. The village of Deir el-Medina is smaller than you imagined. Mud brick homes huddled against the stone, a few goats, children playing in the dust, pausing mid-game when they see you, then scattering like birds. No one bows. That's the first sign of honesty. The foreman, a man with silvered temples and shoulders like quarried stone, greets you with a shallow nod. His name is Pentawer. He says little, but he takes you into the tomb being worked on, a massive project for a noble who insists he's of partial divine blood. Aren't they all? As you descend into the tomb, the air cools, smells like crushed dust and wet stone. The walls are half-painted, red lines sketched for the next layer of ochre. You run your fingers over a depiction of Ra's nightly journey. Boat through fire, serpents at the gates, stars tumbling into shadow. Who painted this, you ask? Beck, Pentawer says. He disappeared 2 weeks ago. Ah, Pentawer watches your face. The gods don't take men like that. Men like that are taken by other men. You meet his gaze. Did he know something? Pentawer doesn't blink. He knew the curve of this tunnel. He knew the room still sealed. He knew which gold was real, and which was paint, and sometimes knowing makes you expensive. You nod. The message is clear. You thank him. Leave a small pouch of silver, not as payment, not as bribe, just respect. On the way out of the valley, you stop at an unmarked shaft, its opening covered in stones and dried branches. You don't ask what lies beneath. You know. Senbi doesn't speak the whole ride back. When you arrive at the palace, the high priest is waiting. He bows low, offers you a carved box. You open it. Inside is a perfectly preserved Shabti figure, a funerary servant, not unusual. Except this one bears your name, your cartouche, your titles. It's made of dark blue faience, painted with gold leaf, eyes lined in black. It's exquisite, and it's far too early. You're not dead yet. The priest smiles gentle. A gift from the craftsman, a symbol of eternity. You look at him. How do they know what to write for someone who's still alive? He doesn't answer. That night you stare at the Shabti on your desk. It's small, unassuming, but it has your whole future carved into it. Because in Egypt, death is always close. So close, they start building for it the moment you're born. You sit up late, reviewing the burial records for the past 2 reigns. You notice a pattern. Certain tombs sealed faster than others. Names removed. Ceremonial changes, the notes say. You know better. So you begin a new list, not of enemies, of the forgotten, builders, painters, foremen. You underline the names that disappeared. Then, in the margin, you write, I will not be buried with liars. It's not poetry. It's a promise. The Nile always hides things. That's the first rule you learn growing up royal. It doesn't matter how wide it flows or how calmly it shimmers in the morning light. It swallows what it doesn't want found. Bodies, secrets, entire generations. You think about that every time you stand on the palace balcony, watching the water slither around the reed-choked banks like a god that only pretends to care. You're standing there now, arms folded, face tight from another sleepless night. You've had too many dreams of tombs, too many visions of sun gods whispering things you don't want to hear. And then this morning, just before dawn, the palace guard found something on the shore. They bring it to you wrapped in linen, soaked through. You expect a body, maybe a message. But when they unroll the cloth, it's something else entirely. A crocodile. Not a large one, just a juvenile, barely the length of your arm. But its eyes are missing. Clean cuts, surgical even. Around its neck is a pendant in the shape of a sun disk, the kind favoured by Aten worshippers. Tucked in its mouth is a small reed scroll. You open it carefully. 3 words. Light does not forget. Of course, it's not the first threat you've received. Probably won't be the last. But this one's different. This one's old. There's something about using the sacred animal of Sobek, a god of protection and the Nile, as a corpse carrier. It's deliberate sacrilege. And in Egypt, sacrilege is rarely random. It's a political statement. It means someone's angry enough to poke the gods in the eye, or confident enough to think the gods don't matter anymore. The vizier arrives shortly after, robes fluttering in the heat, face unreadable as ever. He takes one look at the crocodile, sighs and says, "We're past the point of symbols then." You nod. "Who do you think sent it?" He shrugs. "Everyone and no one. The Aten cult, probably. Or someone who wants it to look like them. Could be one of the southern merchants trying to destabilize the priesthood. Or even the priesthood itself, testing your reaction." You stare at the thing, its leathery skin drying in the sun, jaws still frozen open like it died mid-prophecy. "You ever heard of crocodiles being used like this before?" He smirks. "Once. A story from the reign of Intef the Mad. His enemies tied letters to crocodiles and released them into the Nile. One showed up at the temple steps, dead. Everyone blamed divine judgment. Turns out it was a political trap. And how did it end? Badly," he says. "For the crocodile." You snort. Then you sigh. Because this isn't really about the animal. It's about fear. It's about someone daring you to make a move. Push too hard against the cult and you're the tyrant who strangles belief. Let it grow and you're the weak king who invites heresy into the temple. You're trapped in a familiar pattern. And that's when you realise what you've been missing. You've been playing on land. It's time to move into the water. You summon a group of Nile priests, keepers of the river, worshippers of Sobek. They're not politically powerful, but they're respected. Feared, even. Their rituals are bloody, old, visceral. Crocodiles are their sacred companions. To defile one is to insult them directly. You show them the carcass, the scroll. You do not make demands. You ask questions. What would the river want in return for this? What does it mean when Sobek is blind? What happens if the gods have to choose a side? They leave furious, which is exactly what you wanted. Within 3 days there are ripples. Temple scribes begin recording sightings of unnatural animal behaviour, birds flying at night, fish beaching themselves, crocodiles circling villages without attacking. Some say it's coincidence, others say Sobek is angry. And when Sobek is angry, even Amun listens. You don't stop them. In fact, you encourage it. You order a small ceremony, a symbolic gesture of healing at the Nile. You invite the priesthoods of Amun, Thoth and Sobek. You do not invite any Atenaline scribes. When asked why, you reply gently, "This is a river matter." The day of the ceremony, the sun is brutal. You stand on a sandstone altar overlooking the water, arms outstretched. The priests chant. Incense thickens the air. You toss lotus petals into the current, one for each of the lost builders from the tombs, men who vanished for knowing too much. You say their names aloud. That's the real ritual. Because you've learned. Naming is power. You speak them back into memory, and the crowd listens. You finish by casting the sun disk amulet into the Nile. You say nothing. The silence is louder than any prayer. Later that night, your chamber is visited by a man you've never seen before. He introduces himself only as a merchant from Akhenaten. Says he deals in scrolls, in ideas. He's not threatening. He's not even particularly persuasive. But he hands you something you didn't expect. A map of Akhenaten. Not as it was, but as it is now. Rebuilt. Occupied. Quietly. Fully. Temples recleansed. Sun courts repaired. Roads reopened. It's not a ruin anymore. It's a city again. A capital in waiting. You ask him why he's showing you this. He says, because you're going to need it. Whether you burn it or kneel to it, that city is yours now. He leaves. You keep the map, fold it 3 times, tuck it into your sleeve, and sit in the dark thinking about crocodiles and gods and sunlight that doesn't forget. Because you know something now. The river doesn't just hide things, it returns them. They say you can't fight sickness with ceremony. But in Egypt, that's never stopped anyone from trying. When the first reports come in, fevers in the West Quarter, vomiting in the lower districts, children too weak to sit up straight, the priests go into overdrive, they burn incense day and night, they purify wells with natron and recite healing hymns until their voices crack. But the sickness spreads anyway. That's the thing about plagues. They don't care who sings at them. You hear about it first from the palace physicians who arrive with red-rimmed eyes and linen scrolls already stained with panic. They mumble about water contamination, spoiled grain, miasma. One even whispers the word curse under his breath before quickly correcting himself. You ask him if it's the kind that spreads by air or touch. He doesn't know. None of them do. So you go to the temple of Sekhmet. Not because you believe she'll fix it, but because she has to be seen trying. Sekhmet is the lioness goddess, the bringer of plague and its only cure. Half of her prayers are offerings to keep her wrath asleep. The other half are pleas for mercy once she wakes. Her statues are always terrifying, red-eyed and bloodthirsty, draped in chains and lion pelts. You've never liked her temples. Too dark. Too many jars filled with things that should never be jarred. The high priest of Sekhmet greets you with a cough he tries to swallow. We're seeing more cases, he says, voice hoarse. Mainly children, but it's moving. Where did it start, you ask? A grain shipment, possibly from the east. You nod, though that could mean anything. You know what this really is. A test. Not from the gods, from the people. This is the part in the story when Pharaoh either becomes the shepherd of the nation, or the scapegoat of its decay. You call an emergency council, the vizier, the high priests, the physician's circle, Senbi of course, though he arrives late, looking strangely pale. He waves off your concern. Too much incense, he says. You don't push it. The room hums with tension. You sit at the head of the cedar table and listen as the priesthood argues in circles. Some want full quarantine. Shut the gates, seal the sick inside, let the disease burn itself out. Others demand public sacrifices to appease Sekhmet. A few suggest banning temple access entirely, claiming the infection started with foreign pilgrims. You speak only once. We treat the sick, we isolate the worst cases, but we do not abandon anyone. There's a long pause, then a priest of Thoth, voice brittle with anxiety, asks, "What if this is punishment for the sun cult?" You lock eyes with him. "And what if it's punishment for your greed?" Silence. The vizier hides a small smile behind his hand. The meeting ends shortly after, the council dispersing in a blur of murmured prayers and muttered doom. You remain seated, staring at a scroll untouched in front of you. The numbers are grim, deaths climbing, grain shipments halted, trade slowing, and just beneath it all another whisper gaining ground. The Pharaoh has brought this. Because he refused the old gods, because he flirted with the ten, because he allowed blasphemers to walk the streets. You don't need to be told, you already know the cost of sympathy. Still, you act. You order clean water delivered to the lower districts. You send every palace physician you can spare, with carts of herbs, dried figs and charcoal. You commission special amulets to be made, stamped with the Eye of Horus and distributed freely, more for morale than medicine. And then, quietly, you send a letter to Akhenaten. You don't ask for aid, you ask for records. How did Akhenaten handle illness? Were there rituals, treatments, observations of celestial behaviour? Anything. It's a dangerous letter to write. You don't sign your full name, just your seal, burned into wax and pressed into a scrap of clean linen. You send it with a merchant, not a scribe. You don't tell anyone. 3 nights later, a reply comes. No signature, no scroll. Just a small bundle of dried leaves wrapped in silk, and a note. Steep in wine. Burn in the sick room. Let the light through. You recognise the plant. A rare desert herb. The kind old mothers use when children won't stop coughing. Not poison, not magic, just medicine. You pass it to Senbi, who tests it, confirms it, and orders it brewed by the palace apothecaries. Within a week, the cases in the central quarter slow. Not stop, but slow. That's enough for the people to notice. You start, walking the streets, carefully, surrounded by guards but visibly. You stop at shrines, touch the foreheads of fevered children, accept whatever tokens the sick press into your hands, bits of ribbon, crude carvings, broken beads. One day, an old woman grabs your wrist. "You've been marked," she rasps. You freeze. "What do you mean?" She stares into your face. "Sekhmet came to me in a dream, said the king wore her shadow." You gently pull your hand away. She laughs. It sounds like stone breaking. You think about her words long after. You don't mention them to the vizier, but that night you burn incense to Sekhmet for the first time in months, and when the flame flickers you whisper, "I'm not afraid of you, but I respect the teeth." Because you know how easily worship turns to fire. The following week there's a riot outside the Temple of Thoth. Not large, but loud, angry, people demanding to know why prayers haven't stopped the sickness, why the priests are fat and safe while the streets are full of coughing, why Pharaoh walks but their children don't. You send food, you send water, you don't send soldiers, instead you send Senbi. He stands in the street, robe plain, hands open. He tells them Pharaoh is listening, that their pain is known, that balance will be restored. They scatter, and later, when he returns, pale and shaking, you press your hand to his forehead. Hot. Too hot. You don't say anything. Just sit beside him until the night devours the lamps, and when he finally sleeps, you stare out the window at the city. The cough of gods is louder than thunder. But you're still here, and you will not let Egypt rot from the inside, not while you're watching. There's a kind of silence in the palace that only appears after someone important dies. Not the grand, dramatic kind. No wailing, no flutes, no chests of resin drag through the halls. Just the stillness, a vacuum where voices should be. You feel it before you hear it, before anyone says a word. Senbi is dead. He doesn't cry out, doesn't curse the gods, doesn't claw at the bedding or recite spells from the Book of Healing. He just stops. One breath, then no breath. Like someone blew out a candle and forgot to relight it. The attending physician says it was a fever that reached the brain. Quick, merciful. But there's no such thing as mercy when your oldest friend leaves you behind. You sit beside the cot long after the body cools. You don't move, don't speak. Eventually a servant brings water. You don't drink it. She leaves it on the windowsill. The sun heats it until it tastes like dust. Later you order the body wrapped by your own hand. No one tries to stop you. The servants look away. The guards keep a respectful distance. You bind him in linen, slow, careful, tight enough to honour the dead, loose enough to let the soul breathe. You place a single scarab over his heart. Not gold, just polished stone. He never wanted the shiny things anyway. By sunset he's gone, taken to the necropolis under cover of night, as the fever still burns in parts of the city. There will be no procession, no statue, just a simple tomb and a name etched in a script few will read. But you'll know, and that will be enough. You don't speak for a full day afterward. The court notices. They call it mourning, respect. But the vizier knows better. He visits you in the garden as you sit under the fig trees, eyes on the petals dropping like little pieces of something broken. "You've lost something," he says, voice low. You don't look at him. "Someone." He nods. "But something too." You know what he means. Senbi wasn't just your friend. He was your memory. The one who kept your childhood whole, your decisions in balance, your better self visible in the fog of rule. Without him, you feel heavier, more pharaoh than person. The vizier says, "I can take on his duties." You shake your head. Number no one should take them on. Let them rest with him. He doesn't argue. Instead, he leaves you with a list. Trade disputes, flood projections, an update on the unrest in the western provinces, and one curious item near the bottom, a record of a feast prepared in your name, a gift from the Merchants' Guild, lavish, ceremonial. You frown. You didn't approve any feast. You summon the steward. He swears up and down that the feast was arranged 3 days ago, per instructions from the vizier's office. You summon the vizier again. He reads the document, slowly, silently. Then he looks up. "I didn't write this." You study the script. It matches the vizier's hand perfectly, but something's off, just a little. A too sharp loop on the T in tribute. A smudge of ink where his strokes are usually clean. close enough to fool anyone else, but not you, and definitely not him, which means someone's forging orders, someone within your walls, someone close. You cancel the feast, quietly. And then you begin the slow, patient work of tracing the document's origin. The trail leads through 2 scribes, one missing, one recently promoted to the temple granary. You request the granary logs, find an odd detail, a delivery of rosewater and dried fish to a wing of the palace no longer in use. Why would anyone send food to an empty hall? Unless, of course, it's not empty. You wait until the heat breaks that night and go there yourself. No guards, just you. You step into the corridor where the plaster is crumbling, where the paint has faded, and where no prayers have been spoken in years. You find nothing at first. Then, a small door at the back. You press your palm against it. It creaks open. Inside, a single room, candlelit, low table, 2 cushions, and in the centre, a bowl still steaming. Someone's been here, recently, but they're gone now. You search the room. Hidden beneath the cushion, a single folded papyrus. No signature, just a phrase. Feasts. Hide the poison best. You don't sleep that night. You summon the palace taster. Quietly. Ask how many dishes go untested when gifts are offered to the pharaoh. He's honest. Only a few, he says. But those are the ones people always eat first. You nod. Then ask the palace guard for a list of recent kitchen staff changes. 3 names jump out. 2 from the same region as the Aten cult's resurgence. One with a brother who once served in Akhenaten. Too close, too clean. You order their arrest. But when the guards arrive, they're gone. All 3. Vanished. The palace is leaking, not just physically, spiritually. People are slipping through cracks. Ideas, alliances, and now, assassination attempts. You're not paranoid anymore. You're justified. Still, you don't retreat. You do the opposite. You order a feast, not a fake one, a real one. Lavish, open to the public, grain merchants, priests, boatmen, artisans, even the children of Deir el-Medina. You instruct the cooks personally. You inspect the meat, the dates, the beer jars. You choose the location, the palace gardens. The day of the feast, you stand beneath a canopy of woven reeds, dressed not in gold or falcon feathers, but plain linen. You make no speech, just raise a cup, sip from it, let them see. You survive the night. The rumours explode. Pharaoh cannot be killed. Pharaoh eats no fear. Pharaoh is blessed. You don't spread them. You don't need to. The city will do it for you. The vizier finds you afterward, chuckling. You realise you're becoming the myth they wanted. You smile, tired. I'm just trying not to die, he nods. Exactly. That's what makes it believable. You sit together in the garden, long after the drums fade. Somewhere, someone is already planning another poison, another scroll, another crack in the wall. But for now, you've held the centre, and sometimes, in Egypt, that's the only way to win. There's a story that circulates among the scribes late at night, when the candles burn low and the ink stains reach their elbows. It's a story about a king who died in battle, but whose body was never recovered. To avoid panic, the priests found a look-alike, shaved his head, wrapped him in royal linen and held a funeral for the fake. The people wept, the gods were honoured, and Egypt went on as if nothing had changed. The king? Still dead. But the story, that lived. You think about that a lot now, because as your rule lengthens, your face is starting to feel less like your own. It's everywhere. Carved into obelisks, painted in tomb murals, etched into rings and offering bowls. It's always smiling, always serene. And none of it looks like the man who wakes up in the middle of the night gasping, or who paces the garden whispering names of the dead like they're spells. You're beginning to understand how easy it would be to become a ghost while still breathing, and just when the world seems like it, might finally settle, a strange request arrives. A diplomatic envoy from a small delta village near the edge of the marshlands. They don't ask for grain, not gold, not even protection. They ask for a meeting, privately, with you. The letter is handwritten on cheap papyrus and sealed with nothing but a thumbprint in clay. But what catches your eye is the phrasing. The king we buried may still walk. You read it twice before deciding it's either nonsense or the beginning of something important. So you go. No fanfare, no procession. Just you, the vizier, and 2 guards dressed as scribes. The ride takes a full day by chariot, and by the time you arrive, the sun has dropped low enough to burn the marshes gold. The village is quiet. Too quiet. No children in the alleys, no merchants on the street, just doorways slightly ajar and eyes watching from the dark. The elder meets you at the temple steps. His back is bent, but his voice is clear. "You shouldn't have come," he says. You raise an eyebrow. "I was invited." "No, Pharaoh. The invitation was for your illusion. I didn't think you'd come in person." You pause. "You sent a letter about a dead king," he nods, "and you brought your own ghosts." You don't ask what he means. He leads you inside. The temple is half collapsed. Vines creep up the walls. Birds nest in the corners. The air smells of wet stone and old ash. At the centre, a single offering table still stands, its surface carved with symbols you don't recognise. "Who is the king?" you ask. He says the name like it's a sin. Smenkhkar. The name makes you freeze. You've seen it before, in scattered fragments. A footnote in a scroll. A single cartouche chiselled hastily onto a reused statue. Smenkhkare, the ghost pharaoh, the one who ruled briefly after Akhenaten, before vanishing from the record. Some said he was Akhenaten's brother, others his son. One theory said he was Nefertiti in disguise. No one could agree. But now, this? "He walks?" you ask. The elder shrugs. "A man arrived 2 moons ago. Wears no crown, but speaks in the old tongue. Walks with no sandals. Claims no name, but speaks of light like it's a weapon. A prophet, then? Or a madman? Or worse, a pretender? You step closer to the altar. Examine the symbols. They're not Atenist. Not fully. They're blended. Aten rays stretch toward figures not as offerings, but as bindings. It's almost like the sun is punishing the people beneath it. You shiver. "Where is he now?" you ask. "Gone. He comes and goes, always at dawn, leaves only footprints and whispers." The villagers are frightened, you realise, not of you, of what might come next. Because in a land where the dead can return, what's the point of truth? On the way back to the palace, you question the vizier. Could it be real? He laughs dryly. In Egypt? Anything can be real, especially the lies. But he grows quiet after that, and when you return, things have changed. There's a new scroll waiting for you, no seal, just your name, inside a single line. "You wear a crown carved from my silence." You sit down, hard. Because whether or not this Smenkhkar is real, someone believes he is. And in Egypt, belief has teeth. The priesthood calls an emergency audience the next day. They've heard the rumours. They demand clarity. Is there another king? "No," you say. "Is this a false god?" "No." "Is Egypt secure?" You hesitate, then say, "Egypt is watched." They're not comforted. You know this can't go on. You have to get ahead of the myth. So you take a risk. You commission an artist. Not one of the palace's usual sculptors, but a young woman from the artisan quarter. She's known for her irreverent work. She's carved gods with broken wings, made funeral masks that frown instead of smile. You ask her to sculpt you, not as you're supposed to be, but as you are. She hesitates. You insist. And when the statue is finished, you unveil it in the palace courtyard. It is not flattering. Your eyes are tired. Your shoulders uneven. There's a scar above your eyebrow. You look real. Too real. The court is horrified. You call it the Watcher. You say, "Let Egypt know what its pharaoh looks like when he stops lying." It sends ripples across the capital. The scribes don't know whether to copy it. The priests refuse to bless it. But the people, they come to see it. They leave offerings, not of gold or incense, but of letters. Crude scrolls, folded scraps of linen, messages, pleas, confessions. One simply says, "I thought I was alone." You don't destroy the statue, you leave it, because you're starting to think you've been chasing the wrong enemy. Not a ghost king, not the Aten cult, but the story. The one you didn't write, the one being whispered without your permission, the one that dares to call your truth a performance. So maybe it's time you become the lie. Maybe it's time to write the next part yourself. Because if Smenkhkar walks, he walks in the shadow of your crown. And if the people want a myth, you'll give them one to fear. They come at night, as they always do, the tomb robbers, or so you think at first. A commotion erupts just past the 5th hour, not near the palace, but farther out, beyond the walls, at the edge of the necropolis. You're already half awake when the guard arrives, breathless, blood on his tunic. "Grave breach," he says between gasps. "Royal tomb, unregistered entry, 1 caught, 2 escaped." You rise, already pulling on your robes. You don't ask for details. You go. The night air outside is heavy with sand and the sour sting of crushed limestone. The moon spills across the valley like milk. You travel by chariot, fast, barely slowing for the guards struggling to keep pace behind you. The tomb isn't far. It belongs to a lesser royal aunt, buried with enough baubles and gossip to make her worth looting, but not famous enough to warrant temple curses or statues with knives for arms. You arrive to find the stone door breached, half cracked from a levered pry. 2 guards are dragging a bound figure through the sand, his face covered, his robes torn. You signal for them to stop. The man moans softly, barely conscious. You pull the cloth from his face and freeze. Because the man is familiar, not intimately, not a friend. But you know that jawline, that scar near the eye. He's kin, family. You call over the temple registrar and demand a name. He checks a scroll, reads it twice, then says, "Akhenaten, son of Armes, line of Setabenre, 4th cousin to your late mother." Of course. You knew this would happen eventually. When you become pharaoh, your enemies don't always come from rival cities or rebellious provinces. Sometimes they come from your own bloodline. Sometimes they come with shovels instead of swords. You order Akhenaten to be taken to the palace prison. Not executed, not yet. Because this isn't about gold, it never is. Back at the palace, you review the tomb inventory. Nothing significant was stolen. A few pieces of faience jewellery, a gold spoon, 1 alabaster jar. Easily missed, easily replaceable. But it's not about theft, it's about entry. The tomb had a false passage, one that hadn't been documented, one that led deeper than it should have. The architects assumed it was a construction error. They walled it off during final sealing, but Akhenaten had maps. He knew. Which means someone in your own house is passing information to your extended family, ones with enough royal blood to claim ancestry, but not enough to claim the throne. You sit in your chamber, staring at the map of the necropolis. Each tomb is marked in red. The known ones, the sealed ones, the forgotten ones. Some of them belong to pharaohs no one speaks of anymore, nameless stone traps housing old ambitions. You wonder how many of them were robbed by their own kin. The next day, you visit Akhenaten. You don't bring guards, you bring a chair. You set it across from his cell. He's awake now, eyes sunken, face bruised. You sit, arms folded, and wait. He speaks first. "I didn't come for gold," you nod. "I came for the record scroll." That catches your attention. What record? The burial book. Your mother's lineage, the real one. You narrow your eyes. "She altered it," he says. "We all know it. But the original? It was buried with Setapenra's sister. I needed it." Setapenra, your mother's aunt. One of the most obscure royals in the family tree, married off to a provincial governor, long dead, and supposedly unimportant. But apparently not forgotten. "You think you can use it?" you ask. He shrugs. "I think Egypt believes what it's shown. If I could prove I'm closer in blood to the last untainted pharaoh..." You laugh. Not a cruel laugh. Just tired. "Blood doesn't crown you," you say. He smirks. "Neither do gods anymore." Fair enough. You leave him there. No torture, no spectacle, just silence. A week later, he's found dead in his cell, hanged with his own belt. You don't believe it, but you sign the burial order anyway, privately, quietly, without ceremony, and you summon your archivist. You ask him to show you every record of royal tomb breaches in the last 50 years. It's worse than you thought. Dozens of small incursions, almost all of them involving distant relatives, disgraced advisors, or former palace staff. The dead aren't resting, and it's not greed, it's revision. People are rewriting history by digging it up. Tombs are not just places of rest, they're archives, proof of truth. You seal a chamber, and you think it's done. But someone always wants to open it, to unwrite a name, to plant a new version of a story. And now? Now you're wondering if your own tomb will stay sealed, or if one day someone with just enough royal blood and just enough ambition will come knocking at your afterlife door, chisel in hand. You return to the Valley of the Kings, this time with your architect. "Design me a tomb," you say. "One that doesn't open," he raises a brow. "Ever?" "Ever." He thinks for a moment, then nods. But that kind of tomb will kill the builders. You stare at him. I know. It takes you a moment to breathe again after saying it. You hate it. You do. But you also understand it now. Because your tomb is not just a hole in the ground. It's a statement, a boundary, a message to the future. Let me be. You visit Deir el-Medina again. Speak to the foreman. Make careful selections. Choose only workers with no children, no extended families. Men who will not be missed. You pay them well. Feed them better. You do not lie to them. You tell them the truth. Their names will never be known. Some say yes, some say no. You respect both. The tomb begins. Deep. Off the maps. Carved through hard rock. No false chambers. No symbolic doors. No treasures worth stealing. Just a single passage, winding like a snake through the dark. And at the very end, a room with no wall carvings. Only a stone sarcophagus and a blank wall. Waiting for your name. They start chiselling your name off monuments while you're still alive. It begins subtly, the way all disasters do, like a whisper under a thunderclap. One morning you receive word from a courier returning from the West Bank. He brings with him a stone fragment wrapped in cloth, chipped clean along one edge, the faint curve of a cartouche still visible in the dust. Your cartouche, or what's left of it. At first, you think it's vandalism. A bored worker, a protester too scared to shout. You send an official to inspect it. He returns with bad news. It wasn't a single statue, it was 3, and then 5, and then a dozen. You ride out to see for yourself, and there they are. Your likenesses defaced, your name carved out, your figure left intact, but your title, he who unites the two lands, scraped away like a mistake in the stone. One image has had your face removed completely, not shattered, just erased. The artistry is surgical. This isn't rage. This is precision. You return to the palace and don't speak for hours. Even the vizier keeps his distance. Eventually he brings wine and sits with you beneath the garden fig tree, waiting for you to say something. You finally whisper, "It's happening already." He nods. They always erase kings after they're gone. They rewrite your story in stone, mute your name so your soul can't find peace. It's the final death in Egypt, the one that matters. But this is different. This is while you still breathe, which means someone has decided your legacy should die before you do, and that's when it really hits you. You're already a ghost. The vizier suggests dispatching troops to guard the temples. You shake your head. That won't stop it. You could line the walls with blades and the hands would still come, at night, in silence, with purpose. You don't need guards, you need memory. So you do something no pharaoh has done in generations. You commission a spoken record. You summon the most skilled orator in Thebes, a blind man named Mahu with a voice like dry wind and a memory that's legendary. You tell him your life, all of it. Not the royal gloss. The real story. The palace betrayals, the dreams, the sun cult, Senbi's death, the tomb builders, the false letters, the erased statues. He listens without blinking. When you're done, he nods once, then says, "How long do you want it to last?" You think for a moment. "Long enough to be dangerous." And he smiles. You order the story to be spread orally, passed from scribe to apprentice, from merchant to boatman. Not written, not stored in a scroll that can be burned. Only spoken, only remembered. The story grows. It changes shape as stories do. You're a tragic king in one version, a cunning magician in another. In some, you speak to the sun. In others, you defy it. One child tells a version where you turn into a crocodile and devour your enemies whole. That one makes you laugh, but the name stays. Yours, still alive, still loud, even as your statues fall. The High Priest of Amun requests an audience soon after. He arrives in full regalia, leopard skin over one shoulder, gold earrings swinging with each step. He bows deeply, but his words aren't humble. "Pharaoh," he says, "the people are confused." You arch an eyebrow. "About what?" He gestures delicately. "Your changes, the blurring of tradition, the attention given to voices outside the temple, the cult still breathing in shadows, the tales spoken by the common folk." You let him talk. You watch his eyes. Then you say, "You're not worried they'll forget me. You're worried they'll remember me differently than you want." He flinches, barely. Then says, "Your image is the image of the gods. If it is altered, then maybe the gods need to change. It's a line you shouldn't say. You say it anyway. He leaves without bowing again. That night you receive a warning from a young scribe. Anonymously. He leaves it folded in a basket of figs. The ink is rushed, smudged with thumbprints. It reads, "The priests are gathering scrolls, not to archive, to burn." You don't panic. You move. You call for your best archivist, a woman named Setka, whose hands are stained with ink and whose memory rivals Mahu's. You give her an impossible task. Duplicate every scroll of your reign and hide the copies. Scatter them, in tombs, in merchants' caravans, in sealed jars buried beneath the market floors. She nods. No questions. You trust her. You also send letters to 3 temples outside Thebes. Small ones, distant ones, barely connected to the central priesthood. You ask only for sanctuary, not for your body, for your name. A single statue, a line in a hymn, a carving in the side of a shrine, anything that will keep your identity tied to the land. 2 of them reply. The 3rd goes dark. Your image continues to vanish from public spaces. Scrolls are recalled for updating. Frescoes are revised. Even your own tomb walls, half carved, show signs of tampering. You catch one artisan trying to shave down your title. You don't kill him. You ask him who told him to do it. He doesn't answer. You promote him, and assign him to carve your name into 50 public wells. If he disobeys, the people will notice. Not the priests, the people. The vizier watches all this quietly. Then one night, as you both sit in the shadow of the statue called the Watcher, he finally says it. "They're trying to kill you before you die." You nod. "It's working." He leans in. "Not really. If they truly wanted to erase you, they wouldn't bother with stone. They'd take your voice." You look at him. He means Mahu, the orator, and suddenly you feel cold. You rise. Order 2 guards to go to Mahu's house. When they arrive, the door is open. Inside, overturned scrolls, trampled mats, no blood, no body, just silence. Mahu is gone. The memory of your truth, gone. You sit for a long time that night. The sun rises, and you don't look at it. Not this time, because this war isn't against heresy. It's against memory, and you're beginning to understand. The true curse of being royal in Egypt isn't the betrayal, the poison, or the burial. It's that your life belongs to everyone but you. And your story, that belongs to whoever tells it last. You wake to fire. Not the kind in dreams, the kind that smells of hair and paint and scrolls turned to smoke. It flickers orange through the latticework of your window. You don't run. You already know what it is. You rise, dress in silence, and step out into the courtyard as the city burns in 3 places. The Temple of Thoth, the Royal Archive, and the statue of the Watcher. They went for your memory first, then your story, then your image. The guards are shouting orders, dragging buckets, chasing shadows. The vizier appears beside you like a ghost, barefoot and smoke-streaked. He doesn't speak. He just stares, mouth tight, shoulders heavy. The temple fire is already out of control. You can see the stone face of Thoth cracking, his ibis head splitting at the beak as heat fractures the plaster. At the archive, the fire dances over scroll shelves like a delighted child. Pages twist upward, blackened and weightless. Your laws, your letters, your oaths, gone. You run toward the statue. The Watcher is scorched but not yet fallen. Its eyes have been gouged out and a rope is tied around its neck. 2 figures are trying to pull it down, hooded, fast. One disappears into the smoke when your guards arrive. The other stumbles, gets caught, and is dragged forward. They rip off the hood. It's a priest, a high one, from a moon circle. He doesn't fight, doesn't beg. He just watches you with hatred like it's a kind of hunger. "What are you doing?" you ask, voice calm. He spits. "You were never supposed to last." You stare at him, and realize something that freezes you harder than fear ever could. This wasn't ordered. This wasn't a royal assassination. It wasn't sanctioned by the full temple hierarchy. This is the result of something more dangerous. A permission. Someone, somewhere, didn't give the command, but they stopped stopping it. And in Egypt, silence is louder than orders. You walk away from the statue. Behind you, it finally falls. The Watcher hits the earth with a thud that feels like your second death. The priest is taken to the prison. You don't visit him. You already know what he'll say. The rest of the night is spent putting out the fires. You watch scribes sob as they lift wet scrolls, the ink bleeding into nonsense. You stand in the courtyard of the palace as the wind drags ashes across the flagstones. One lands on your arm. You flick it away without thinking. The vizier finds you as the sun starts to rise. He's holding something. It's small, a scorched papyrus, somehow intact. You take it, unroll it. It's a letter from you to Senbi, an old one. If we don't leave something that outlives us, we were just noise. You don't remember writing it, but the moment you read it, you feel Senbi's voice in the back of your mind laughing at you. Not mocking, just amused. Well, congratulations, you imagine him saying. You made a hell of a noise. Later you gather what's left of your council. The room is dim, dusty, full of people who smell like smoke and fear. Some want retribution. Others want exile for the priesthood. A few suggest fleeing to Memphis. You speak softly. No more statues. They blink. No more paintings. No more scrolls. No more temples with my name. If they want to erase me, let them. They start to protest. You raise a hand. But they won't forget what they can't control. You begin to outline a new plan, one that horrifies them. You will become the absent king. Your likeness will disappear, but your presence will not. You will speak in markets, appear in plain robes among fishermen, eat in public squares, touch the hands of beggars, travel without chariots, without guards, only with the wind behind you. You will become a story the priests can't pin down, a rumour they can't burn, a memory that walks. It's the only way now, not to rule, but to survive. The vizier, watching you closely, finally nods. You'll become a myth, he says. No, you reply. I'll become a rumour of truth. The people take to it faster than you expect. They don't need statues anymore. They only need glimpses. A mother swears you healed her child with a touch. A boatman claims you gave him grain during the famine. A traveller from the Redland says he saw you walking barefoot across the dunes. You did none of it. Or maybe you did. Even you can't be sure anymore. Because you've shed so much of the role, so much of the image, that you're not certain where the lie ends and you begin. And you realise this is what immortality actually is. Not gold, not tombs, not names in stone, but a shape behind the curtain, a voice in the street, a presence too widespread to kill. Your tomb continues, dug deep into the desert where no map dares record. The workers are quiet, loyal. When one dies from a rock slide, the others bury him in your future chamber, with no marker, no rites, just silence. It feels fitting. One night, you return to the edge of the valley, alone. You carry no symbols, just the last piece of your mother's jewellery, a lapis ring that she wore every day, even in the bath, even in mourning. You press it into the rock near the entrance of your tomb, behind a loose stone only you and one other know about. No gold, no curse, just the smallest seed of memory, a whisper for the next life, because when your name is finally struck from every wall, when your statues are sanded smooth and your lineage rewritten, there will still be someone, somewhere, who hears a story about a pharaoh who walked without guards, who burned nothing but his own image, who lived long enough to be forgotten properly. And maybe that's the best ending you can hope for. Not eternity, but a quiet legacy. One that burns in hearts, not scrolls. One that doesn't need statues at all. There's a strange peace in being forgotten. Not the cruel kind. The one where your name is scraped off a wall like mildew, but a gentler kind. The forgetting that feels like floating. You start noticing it in the way people speak around you. No longer Pharaoh, not even your majesty. Now it's that man, or the one who helped with the well, or simply him. There are no titles in Whispers, only impressions. You're not afraid of it anymore. In fact, you lean into it. You stop wearing linen dyed with imported saffron. Your headdress disappears into storage. You trade your gold sandals for sandals made of reeds, the kind the brickmakers wear. You walk through cities without guards. No one bows anymore, not because they don't care, but because they don't know. You move through Egypt like wind through grain. Present, but not grasped. It's not abdication, not exactly. You still sit in councils sometimes. You still sign grain orders, oversee the canals, speak with generals about Nubian border watch, but always from behind a curtain, always through proxies. They call you the Hidden One, not as a slur, but as reverence. You've become something different now, Not just king, something stranger, something quieter. It begins to take on its own shape. A girl in Memphis claims she was visited by a man with your eyes who taught her to calm fevers with mint. A caravan in the Red Land says a robed traveller appeared at their campfire and warned them of a sandstorm. They didn't listen. Half their party perished. The surviving half builds a shrine, not to Amun, not to Aten, to you, or the idea of you. You don't stop them. How could you? You've become exactly what every pharaoh feared, uncontrollable, not through armies, not through gold, but through absence. You watch as temples struggle to redefine you. The priesthood writes cautious hymns, hedging bets, referring to you not by name but by titleless epithets. The sleeper, the one who refused the image, the shadow on the sun. Some try to link you to Osiris, the god who dies and returns. Others say you were never a man at all, just a divine riddle sent by the gods to test Egypt's memory. You hear them, you smile, and you don't correct anyone. Meanwhile, Akhenaten thrives. Yes, thrives. The abandoned city of light, once emptied, then quietly repopulated by those who wanted something different, something simpler. You begin receiving messages coded in merchant shipments, symbols pressed into the clay of amphorae, an open eye, a broken cartouche, a sun drawn sideways. You recognize them. The Aten cult is no longer a threat. It's a movement now, less a religion than a tone, a worldview. It spreads slowly, silently, not through temples but through traders, midwives, artisans. It doesn't preach, it shows, and every time someone follows that path they speak of you, not as a king, as a beginning. Your enemies become frustrated. The statue burners, the name erasers, they thought they'd won. They scorched the walls, burned the scrolls, shattered the likenesses, but the people stopped needing the symbols. They kept the story. A travelling sculptor tells you this in a roadside tavern without knowing who you are. He's drunk, sunburned, shaping a doll's face from river clay. They tried to erase him, he says, slurring, but they forgot we already saw him. You buy him a drink. You tip him in silence. The vizier dies in the winter. He goes in his sleep, no ceremony. Just a simple burial beneath the fig tree in the courtyard, marked with a small stone etched with one phrase. He remembered what mattered. You weep quietly when no one's looking. He was the last tether to your crown. Your mask. The one who knew the entire game and still chose to play it beside you. After that, you make yourself smaller still. You move to the outskirts of the city, in a house once owned by a retired cartographer. You tend the garden, read aloud to passing children, write only when necessary. You feel the muscles in your back loosen. Your heartbeat finally settles into its natural rhythm. You no longer chase your legacy, it follows you anyway. One morning a boy shows up at your gate, no older than 10, dust in his hair, bare feet. He holds out a small wooden carving. It's you. Not the real you, not even close. But the version of you he's heard about. Serene, wise, with a slightly amused tilt to the mouth. I made it, he says proudly. My uncle says you stopped the sun from fighting with the river. You smile. You think I did that? He nods. You don't correct him. You take the carving and place it on your windowsill. You keep it there for the rest of your life. When the end comes, it's quiet. You're in your sleep chamber. The air is cool. The shutters open. The sound of frogs at the riverbank murmuring just beneath the rustle of fig leaves. You close your eyes, not with fear, but with a kind of relief. You don't expect gods. You don't expect light. You don't expect judgment. You've already lived those things. You expect only quiet, and that's exactly what you get. Your burial is private, not royal. A group of quiet followers carries you, disguised, unannounced, into the desert. Not to the tomb you built, no. To another, a smaller one, hidden even from maps. No name carved, no spells inscribed, just a blank wall and a single item placed on your chest, the little carving from the boy. Years pass, centuries. Your name fades from official records, but the stories, they linger. Children still play in sand, saying your name as if it tastes like honey. Old women still whisper prayers not to gods but to you, asking for justice, for memory, for light. And somewhere, in a desert wind that no one sees coming, a whisper rides on the heat. He lived without a statue. He died without a name. But Egypt remembers him anyway, so now you lie still, somewhere deep in the sands, far beyond the maps, where no tourists or thieves or history gluttons will ever find you. No false door carved above your bones, no scarab-shaped curse warning would-be looters to flee in fear. Just silence, just dust, and just enough space for the story to settle in around you. And maybe that's exactly how it should end. You never really wanted to be remembered in granite. You just didn't want to be used, cut into pieces and repackaged as a cautionary tale, or a puppet for priests and scribes. You wanted to be remembered as you were, uncertain, clever, exhausted, trying, human, and in the end, that's what you became. Not a god, not a golden statue with lion feet and an awkwardly masculine chin, just a story that wouldn't stay buried, a rumour with a little truth in it. The pharaoh who refused to play along, because in ancient Egypt, where memory was magic and death was just a slightly longer form of waiting, forgetting someone was the cruelest curse of all. But being remembered, without temples, without scrolls, without even your own name, that was something else entirely. That was power. So, if you're still listening from wherever you are, and let's be honest, you probably are, you made it. Not to eternal life, not exactly, but to something even rarer, a legacy without chains, and maybe, just maybe, when the wind picks up along the Nile and the reeds shake with something they almost remember, maybe that's you, still watching, still walking, still free,